Check. Check.
You want me to like get on my
Check.
computer?
There we go. Send me the check. Regina. Any APB on Regina?
She's usually rolling in right around. Yeah, she gets out right at 5:30. So.
Okay.
She's got to hustle from downtown to downtown.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Can you hear us?
Yes.
You sound. You don't sound very sick.
Well, that's the joy of night shift.
Okay. Very good. Can you see what I'm sharing?
I can. Thank you.
Excellent. If we write anything on the board, I'm sure somebody will take a snap of it and send it to you.
Dave just asked if Johanna's coming.
She's here.
He's in the house.
I'm going to the bus like
You don't hear that?
No, I asked before I heard that.
Yeah.
Wow. Take back keys all my work.
He's high right now because she's
I know. Sorry, you didn't see
new
that.
job, new car.
Yes.
Get a new car too.
I'm getting it.
Have you gone to your dad to use as driver? Did you just tell him mine's our business?
I ended up selling my own business and I did myself.
That's right. Tell him you said it straight.
You're sending David Server here.
Yes.
We had an interesting conversation with my family about how it was interpreted back in my day versus how it's interpreted now. It's all within context.
It's like what my mom used to say. If she would if she would hit somebody on the back of the head, she'd be like, "That's a love."
Yeah.
I don't ever use that phrase in anger, but one of my buddies, they were joking around and we're messing with each other. And yeah, occasionally, but not as I'm trying to get something mad. Never.
Yeah, it is interesting. Nowadays, it's kind of like a term in endearment sometimes. Hi, Regina. Of course, my wife wasn't there.
My mom would use it.
I'm open to it. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Just going to the garage, I stopped at some gas station, and I think Matthew had to go in and use the restroom. So I just started waiting in the car, and this truck pulled up, and there's these guys, and all they did was just like flipping each other off the lights. And I'm like, what? You know? And I kind of.
I know.
Yeah, they're just joking around.
That was in,
You can top that?
yeah, so, I'm on Main Street Pavilion,
Yes.
south, and I'm number 3 on the red light. So there's hillbilly canes and email spread, and they're rusty Toyota Tacoma in front of me, and then Johnny Rockstar in his Harley Davidson motorcycle in front of me. And you can obviously guess Harley Davidson is
Oh, yeah.
driving him like a tornado. So what do hangnail Hank and hillbilly Fred
Oh,
do
they're
in behind me or in front of me? They drop their Toyota Tacoma rust bucket in the neutral. So I'm behind them both, witnessing this rev off, and then one guy turns left, another guy turns right, and I go straight. And I'm just like, can I just witness that? Like, that went on for like a full 30 seconds. Because I'm the only one that saw it and heard it.
letting them loose. Did they peel out at all?
Just get to where you need to go.
Yeah.
You need to let everybody know where you're at.
Okay, folks. Are we ready? Are we ready for week 4?
Regularly gone.
We are in week 4. And Joe and I have the typical agenda on the board. So week 4, when we break, we'll be halfway through this course. We'll be halfway through the course when we break. So we'll go over the paper. Okay, we'll talk about that. I did extend the due date. I didn't get a lot of accolades on that, but I just want to let you know I did extend the due date. We'll talk about the interview. We'll go over chapter 5 and 7 homework, and then we'll do chapter 9 cost of capital tonight, and then we'll do cash flows after break. 9:30 p.m. ish. Dolphins Steelers. Yeah. And I'll be able to provide you a little bit of input on your final capital budgeting project. You'll be able to start working on that. Okay? Sound like a plan? Any questions before I kick off? All good? Ready to go? Okay. All right, talked about that, last week's highlights. Okay, I basically did a cut and paste on the note I sent. I just want to reinforce the key objective of the paper is to diagnose and prescribe the health of Netflix, okay? I don't want you to feel that you are hard-coded, okay, into using certain data points. Okay, that's kind of the beauty of it from that perspective. I mean, the college has provided these sources, and there's some question about, well, should this be the right industry or not? Now, I went back in my notes, and I was reviewing this with Steve after we had our workshop, and he picked this NASI, and I think I sent this to you. And this shows this as the industry that Netflix is part of. Do I agree with it? Well, initially I went to him and said, I think it's this other one. He came back and did the source code on this, okay? So, all right. So that's the industry they got it with. Now, if you choose to map this to another industry, like in these sources down here, it puts Netflix in different industries. I'm okay with that, as long as you cite it, right? So, hey, look, we're comparing this liquidity against what we found in MarketWatch, which is this industry, and this is what we have found, and this is what we're diagnosing and suggesting to help us. Make sense? What else do I have? So I provided those. And just like I mentioned, as teams, you have creative liberty to use other group sources to contribute to diagnostics and prescription for the analysis, as long as you cite them appropriately. And I was asking earlier before everybody's writing, apparently you haven't come across using this yet with classes to date. So this hasn't become an exposure, let's say. True? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to take an action back to Steve, who's going to be part of your strategic management, and just say, look, there's some wiggle room here because I'm not sure if the industry or somebody's reporting have matured enough to say this is where this belongs. Because you have one suggesting this industry, right? You have another one that says Netflix is a top player in another industry, and then some of these, if you were to look them up, it shows Netflix in an entirely different type of industry. So, Dave.
Are we focusing on the industry in terms of because they're the top player, or?
No, just you're focusing on the industry just as a comparison to the industry as far as the ratios are concerned.
I meant more along the lines of are you picking the industry because they're a top player there, or because I can see where they would be a top player in disgruntled. But at the same time, I felt like the emphasis was more on the fact that they're streaming.
Yeah, and I think there's different metrics being used by different, I don't know who you
I
got.
just feel like
Yes,
from the
yes.
beginning, we've always been comparing them to the Hulu and the HBOs and the Primes of the world and YouTubes of the world. And
Right.
none of those do videotape rental.
Right.
Disc rental.
Right. I'm going to take that back to Steve, so he has as you're coming through towards strategic management, he'll know.
I am totally open to argue on this.
Understood.
Same
Yeah,
here.
send her.
Same here.
And that's good, right? Due date for the assignment, Friday, November 1st by noon. That would be this Friday.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, any more questions on the paper? Nothing yet?
Joe, did we have any questions?
No, I don't, I think he answered them. I think our biggest one was the differences in industries and, just how to validate some of our rationale with what we wanted to select and talk about. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
So you do want the industry averages for?
I want it comparative to the industry. Now, where you source the industry, I'm be creative.
Okay. Do you want the industry averages for each ratio? Like?
For each of the groupings.
Oh, I see. For liquidity. Okay, got it.
Okay.
Gotcha. So not
Now, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at some of these, but each one of these, once you get used to the website and how the structure of it is, once you tune your eye to that, there's certain interesting areas, and before you know it, if you have a real interest in it, you can go long and deep on some of these things. So, okay.
Yeah, but remember how we also
Rochelle.
talked about the book value as well and comparing it to the industry, we couldn't find any data on that because I did find data on the PE ratio, but
Yeah.
not the market book.
But you didn't find it on the market book.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, I'm real flexible. Okay. And I'm looking for you guys to be kind of creative, right? So if you role play your consulting teams, right, for Netflix, going into Netflix to say, hey, look, this is how we're evaluating your performance based on these parameters and metrics. So I'm okay on it. Okay. Other questions? Question, Regina. Are you just processing this?
I'm processing.
Very good. Okay. And that's the note I sent out. Everybody got the note, right? Okay. Okay. Interview with a financial decision maker. This is coming to a theater near you. Okay. And if you're a Star Wars fan like I am, you've already booked your seats for December 20th.
Yeah.
I'll be at the 8:30 showing at Cinemark if that has any impact. You have to join you. Insurance possible. What's that?
Preparing myself to be very disappointed.
Oh, it's your birthday. Positive attitude, sir.
No, I'm saying that movie's gonna be
I know what you're saying.
But
I'm hoping for the best.
Yes.
uh,
Okay, your interview, has everybody lined up somebody yet?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, everybody good?
No,
Yeah.
Okay, so you still gotta line somebody up.
I have a question.
Yes.
I don't have that person in my organization.
You can do it from the
No.
outside your organization.
Yeah, you can do it from outside.
Can I use somebody at say the bank I use and somebody higher up in the organization perhaps? Or does it have to be a CFO specifically?
Does not have to be a CFO. It has to be somebody that should be able to explain how financial decisions, capital budgeting, financial performance, etc. They can speak to that.
Well, he's wondering because he's in the Army. He's the financial decision maker for the Army.
No, I'll just go ask that
Isn't that somebody
organization.
out in DC?
I don't want to talk to anybody. They suck at the money thing anyway.
So, yes, if you want to go into a different circle, you may do that. Now, I have had some cases where dire straits have come, and I've lined up Phil Schmidt from here, from the college, and Lori Leo. So that's kind of absolutely have to, we can help you out that way. But I just assume if you can, penetrate your circles for that. Okay? So, essentially the key point here in setting up this interview is to get in front of this individual. Here's your agenda right here. You're not taking a picture of me, are you?
No, I got a picture of the words.
didn't sign it.
Okay, I sent this on an email too.
Did you?
Yes. So here, kind of look at these as your questions and make them open-ended, right? You don't want to go in there with yes, no, because you'll be out of the interview in 15 minutes. You want to at least maybe get an hour's time with them. if possible.
That's a lot.
Mine took six
Yeah, that's
minutes
I'm
and
doubtful
28 seconds.
now.
Things like a half hour is the most I'm gonna get with my
But I
CFO.
answered
Same, I got a half
5 questions in depth.
6 minutes?
6 minutes and 28 seconds. Because I videotaped it, or I
He's efficient.
Nice.
That's a good idea.
Set up a half hour, you might get an hour.
I don't know.
Sometimes these go long, so it's good. You're, and the key thing is you're learning a language here, and you're going out and speaking to somebody that speaks it fluently. Any questions on that?
2 pages,
2 pages.
double space.
Yes.
Submit a 2-page overview of your findings, and you'll speak to them week 7. We'll just go around and talk about the interview.
And this is
People
due
ask you
week
about it,
7 too, right?
and it's due week 7.
Same with capital budget.
Capital. Yeah, we'll talk about that as we get closer.
That looks like a nightmare.
Yeah,
Which
that does.
I would like.
I'll tell you how it turns. I'll tell you how the capital budget turns into a nightmare.
It is.
The capital budget turns into a nightmare when you wait until the last minute to do it. That's why I'm helping you right now to get it started.
How far behind are.
Okay? Because if you wait,
Just like, looks like a
yeah, the worse it gets. Seriously.
So when are we gonna go over that?
Today.
Yay, good thing.
Okay?
Overall.
Any other questions? Everybody good? Okay. All right. Where were we? Where are we going? Okay. Cost of debt. So last week we were on the bottom half of our intrinsic value equation, free cash flow. We talked about these particular different areas, the 5-step easy steps to get to free cash flow. We're on the bottom side, and last week we looked at cost of debt and also cost of equity. Cost of debt in the form of loans, generally $1,000 loans with a certain payment in a certain bond market, okay, with a present value, a future value, and calculating that. We also looked at cost of equity from the perspective of stocks. There is regular consistent growth stock, uses the Gorton model, and there's a stock that is growing unevenly until it gets to a point of consistent growth, and we went through that. Okay, we'll go over that in a couple minutes with our homework assignments. So we looked at the cost of debt, and now today we're going to kind of move it up and look at how these come together, stock, preferred stock, and loans, into the weighted average cost of capital equation. So we're going to do that today. That's chapter 9. And then chapter 10, we're going to look at analyzing cash flows. Okay? So this will be the last week that you have 2 chapters. Next week it'll only be 1 chapter, chapter 11. Okay, so kind of
Is it bankruptcy?
bankruptcy? No. For next week?
That's 11.
Good, I like that. I wasn't catching on. Very nice.
Jesse's out.
I guess so. All right, so going back, we looked at value of a bond. Remember, we kind of went through, here's a timeline. Here's the long equation to doing that bond calculation. Shows the different present values of each period of time, the payment, all the way till you get that $1,000 back, plus that last $100 payment. In this particular scenario, our $1,000 bond, present value would be $1,000 because we're discounting it back from this future of 10 years from now, and it's in a bond market of 10%. Okay. From a calculator perspective, kind of the bottom half of this, if we use our inputs from our calculator, time value of money calculations, period of time is 10. It's in a bond market of 10%. My payment to this particular bond is 10% coupon rate, so it's 10% of $1,000 par value, my future value, and I can plug in and calculate for PV and come up with $1,000. Oh, we're losing people already. Okay. Just kidding. Then we did our little, I call this a hail pop. from the Comet, Hale-Bopp Comet. Anybody familiar with that? All right, we'll look that up. All right, so from here, as this bond matures to its maturity rate, we were looking at from this 10 years to go perspective, okay? And if it was in a bond market of 7%, that bond would be selling at a premium, because essentially 7% bonds or 7% coupon rate bonds is $70 payment versus your bond or this bond being 10%, which is paying $100 payment. Essentially, this is going to be seen as a more expensive or a more valued bond, so it sells at $1,211 during this period of time in a 7% market, as opposed to if you're holding on to this 10% bond in a 13% bond market, it would sell at a discount because the bond you have is paying out $100 per month or per period versus these bonds would be paying out at $130 per period. Okay. You stop me when you feel the need to. I'm sure you will. Okay. Common stock, the value of common stock is determined by dividends that are put out. Okay. This is a regular growth view of common stock where your price of your value of your stock is the dividend in year one. Okay, over we simplify this even more, it's going to be RS plus G, or rate of return plus growth rate, as you saw before, and you can figure out what that stock price would be each year, depending on what your calculations or what your time frame would be each year based on what that dividend is each year over the rate of return plus the growth. So some big picture stuff. Here's the Gordon model. Price of the stock equals dividend in year one. Dividend in year one is equal to the initial dividend times 1 plus the growth rate over what that rate of return is minus the growth rate. That's for constant growth. And then the one particular mini case problem, and also you have the problem in 713 or 712. Here, from a non-constant growth perspective, we kind of separated this out and determined what the growth rate of the dividends were for each year. And then we determined what that present value of each of those dividends were during the non-constant growth. Here we had 30%, 25, and 15. It became constant at 6% after that period of time. So we took our present value of each of those dividends and we're going to add them on to the present value of that stock price when it starts going into constant growth. Add those up and we come up with the present value or the stock price at time equals 0 for that. Okay, so we went over that last week. And then finally, value of preferred stock. Okay, that's equal to whatever that dividend or payment is over the required rate of return. Rather simple equation. You can figure out your value that way, or you can, do your calculations on the formula to solve for what the cost of that preferred stock is, or the rate of return on that preferred stock, based on the inputs above, and you find out that that's 10%. I think your last question in 7 had that. Everybody good so far? Hit the homework. Homework for any specific questions on the homework? I think some of you were throwing me questions. Sometimes I delay my response so that give you some time to gel, and then all of a sudden come back and say, hey, I got it. So
Yeah, after like 10 big YouTube videos.
Yeah, I do the same
It took me
thing.
3 hours to just do link chapter stuff.
Yeah, it took me.
But I was satisfied because I figured it out.
There you go.
But I don't remember. Like, I want to find it.
There you go. Yes. The other class has actually a smart board on it, which I like using, but not today. Okay, so let's kind of walk through these. So 5.8, and this is on page 227 of your books. It talks about Thatcher Corporation bonds will mature in 10 years. Bonds have a face value of $1,000 and an 8% coupon rate paid semi-annually. Okay, so it's paid semi-annually, and that means we have to do some things to the payment. We have to do some things to the rate, right? So we got to, look at those particular things. So we got to do things to the payment, the period, and the rate. Okay. Price of the bond is $1,100. The bonds are callable in 5 years at a call price of $1,050. So we're going to figure out what their yield to maturity is, and also what their yield to call is. Okay. So I got a couple things going on here. Yield to maturity is okay. I got 10 years left. How much is that rate or that yield on the bond? And then yield to call, within the bond or within the contract of the bond, there's an ability for Netflix to call the bonds. So a call of bonds basically means that they are going to pay $10.50 at 5 years. Okay, and you, in buying that bond, would accept that condition. Okay, so can you guys see that all right? Or
Oh,
no?
yeah, I was just thinking that I didn't do that time.
Yeah, I didn't do any time.
Yeah.
It wasn't specific.
No, but they're good, right? They kind of contribute to the learning, right? So it contributes to the learning. So here we go. All right. So we know they're going to mature in 10 years. So our timeline's out to 10 years, and it's a $1,000 bond. So we're going to get $1,000 back in 10 years. We also know that the present value. Do we know the present value at this time? I don't think we do. Yeah, we do. Don't we?
Yeah, they're $1,100.
$1,100, right? So what do we know about the bond selling at $1,100 right now? It's selling at a premium, right? It's selling above its price, right? So it's selling at a premium, okay? We also know that 5 years, there's contract language that says they're callable at 5 years, okay? So it's a semi-annual bond, okay? So we can figure out what that yield to maturity is by calculating for IY, all right? So my inputs, N, semi-annual bond, 10 years, however, it's paid twice a year, right? So it's 20. My payment is paid twice a year. However, my payment is $80, right? 8% coupon rate of $1,000, $80 divided by 2, $40 payment. Present value, $1,100. Future value, $1,000. Okay. So we run our numbers, right? And when we solve that, what do we get? 3.31, right? I got that swapped, I apologize. 3.31, so what I have to do is I have to double that, right? Because what I've done is I've solved it for each half year at 3.31, and it should be 6.62. Everybody track with that. Okay. All right, so that's the yield to maturity. That bond is yielding 6.62%. to maturity. For every dollar, 6.62 cents you're gaining. Okay, as the owner, right? What is their yield to call? All right, well, we kind of shorten our timeline, right? We've got our present value, we got our future value, we have our time frame. It's semi-annual, so we got to split it. Okay, so N is 5 times 2, so that's 10. My payment is still the same. Instead of $80 per period, I'm doing it twice, so it's $40 per period. $1,100 PV, future value 1050 at the callable time frame, and I come up with. This is showing 6.49 because it's multiplied by 2, but it would be 3.24 semi-annually. I don't know why I mixed those up. And you got annually would be 6.48. Okay? That is Thatcher Corporation. Any questions on that?
So when you do it in the calculator, like 3.24 times 2, it's 6.48. But when you put it in Excel, it comes to 6.49. So which the book says 6.4.
You're good. It's probably 6.485 or something. It's happening. You're good on that. Okay. Good. Next. Bond valuation, talking about Hilliard. So I only have 2 questions here. All right. Suppose Hilliard Manufacturing sold an issue of bonds with a 10-year maturity at $1,000 par value, 10% coupon rate, semi-annual interest payments. Okay, once again, it's semi-annual. All right. On the capital project, that will also be semi-annual. Okay. 2 years after the bonds were issued, the going rate of interest on the bonds, such as these, fell to 6%. At what price would the bond sell? B, suppose that 2 years after the initial offering, the going rate had risen to 12%. At what price would they sell at? Suppose that 2 years after the issue date, as in part A, interest rate fell to 6%. Suppose further that the interest rate remained at 6% for the next 8 years. What would happen to the price of the bonds over time? Okay, so we got our Hilliard bonds, 10-year maturity, $1,000 par value. Okay, 10% coupon rate. So it's 10% of 1,000. That's $100 per payment. Okay, but these are semi-annual. All right, so we have to look at dividing that by 2. Okay, now 2 years after the bonds were issued. 2 years after, so we're starting now at year 2. The going rate of interest on the bonds fell to 6%. Okay, at what price would the bonds sell? So now I am figuring out what my present value would be at that year 2 mark in a bond market of 6%. Okay. Everybody good on that? Okay. So my bond rate, IY, 6%. However, it's semi-annual, so it would be 3%. Divided by 2. My period of time. 2, I'm at year 2. I got 8 more years to go to maturity. So 8 semi-annually is 8 times 2 is 16. My payment, it's a 10% coupon rate on the bond. Right there. So it'd be $100. We divide that by 2 because we're getting it twice a year. So that would be 50. My future value is 1,000. So I am calculating for what the present value or what that bond is selling at this point in time. Okay, so I can run my numbers, use my ABS, absolute value, present value of those different variables, and you come up with the bond selling at $1,251.22. So, makes sense. The bond has a coupon rate of 10%. It's in a bond market of 6%. So we already kind of have a gut feel that it's going to be selling above $1,000. So it's going to be selling at a premium. Other bonds in the market are paying $60 a payment versus my $100 payment bond. Okay. So the reverse now is true for 521B. Again, we're still at that 2-year mark. Let's do this. Okay, same conditions, but instead of the bond market falling to 6%, we're saying it's rising to 12%. At what price would the bonds be? Okay. 16, payment is still the same. Payment of $50 is the same. Future value of $1,000 is the same. Your difference is what the current rate out in the marketplace, IY, is. It's 12 divided by 2 because it's twice a year. So 6%. We just do our calculations from there, and we find out that present value is what the bond is selling at right now, and that is $898. So the bond is now selling at a discount. Right? Premium here because it's selling above the par value. Discount here because it's selling below the par value. Okay. Now, Netflix, as the owner of this bond, that's good for them, right? Because they have bonds out there that are only paying, that would only be paying 10%. And other ones are 12%, right? You as a bond owner might want to do something about that, depending on what your goals and objectives are. Okay. Last one, and this is more of a, kind of a qualitative response than an empirical response, but you can certainly map it out here. Suppose that 2 years after the issue date, as in Part A, 6%, and it remains 6% for the next 8 years. What would happen to the price of the bond over time? Okay, so if I go back to my big picture, right? Imagine this is 6% instead of 7%, and it remained at 6% for the last 10 years. Essentially, that bond price, if you calculated it each year, it would show that that bond is decreasing in value, okay? So that picture kind of shows what's happening here, okay? 10 years left, right? 9, 8, 7, 6. See how the bond is starting to decrease here to that point in time. So the bond would, over time, the price of the bond would decrease until it reached maturity at 8 years, and it would continue to sell at a premium because it's still higher than 1,000 as it reaches its maturity date.
I got that wrong.
-8. No, I'm just kidding. Okay? Goodness? On to 7, stocks. Okay, let's look at stocks.
Chapter 7.
(7.3), 7.13, and 7.14. All right, so we'll look at a constant growth valuation, then we'll look at non-constant growth, then we'll look at a preferred stock valuation. All right, so constant growth, I'm on page 316. Woedke Manufacturing stock currently sells for $22 a share. The stock just paid a dividend of $1.20. So therefore, the initial stock or initial dividend is $1.20. And the dividend is expected to grow forever at a constant rate of 10% a year. Stock price is expected, what is the stock price expected 1 year from now? And what is the estimated required rate of return of World Key stock? Assume the market's in equilibrium, etc. Okay, so using the Gorton model on this particular one, because it's a constant growth, price of the stock, okay, equals price times 1 plus the growth rate. Okay, relatively simple. It's at $22 a share, and it's growing at a constant 10%. So it's a matter of multiplying that by the growth rate, 1 plus G, which is 10%. You get $24.20 is what the price of the stock will be in year 1. Okay. Next, what is the estimated required rate of return on the stock? We take our Gordon model and solve it for our rate of return. We find that that is equal to the dividend in year 1 divided by the price of the stock initially, plus the growth rate. We already know what the growth rate is. We already know what the initial price of the stock is, $22. And our dividend in year 1, right, is the initial dividend, $1.20 times 1 plus the growth rate. On that number, you get $1.32. Plug it back into your equation, and you find out that that stock has a rate of return of 16%. Good? Okay. On to the big one, or the complicated one of non-constant. And this is with Simpkins. Simpkins Corporation does not pay any dividends because of expanding rapidly and needs to retain all of its earnings. So it's not paying out any dividends. Kind of that first mini case that we looked at where they reduced the amount of dividends being paid out. This situation is they are not paying any dividends. Hopefully their stockholders will understand and want to hold on for whatever comes in the years ahead based on what they're using with that. However, investors expect Simpkins to begin paying dividends with the first dividends of 50 cents coming 3 years from today. Okay, so people that are following Simpkins, that have stock ownership in Simpkins, understand their game plan, and they recognize that they're going to go without a dividend on their stock for a couple of years, but they recognize in year 3, they're forecasting 50 cents, 90 cents, and $1.62, or a growth rate of 80% out in that particular time frame. Okay. Grow rapidly at a rate of 80% during years 4 and 5, and after year 5, the company should grow at a constant rate of 7%. If the required rate of return on stock is 16%, what is the value of the stock today? Assume equilibrium, etc. So something's happening with Simpkins. They may be working on some type of product or service they're going to announce. Okay, so there's an anticipated well of increase to the stock price in a non-constant way for a couple of years before it gets constant. Okay, and people are willing, essentially, are willing to wait for that, right? So we start our analysis and our process starting out at year 3. So here's our particular variables. The initial dividend is 0. Okay. Our dividend in year 1 is 0. Our dividend in year 2 is 0. Our dividend in year 3 is 50 cents. Okay. And we know that that dividend is going to grow 80%, 80%, and then it's become 7%. So let's just walk through that on the timeline. So initially, the 50 cents is a given. 90 cents, okay, that is 80%, or I'm sorry, 50 cents times 1 plus 80% growth, giving us 90%. And then again, in year 5, that's growing by 80% again. So now it's 81 plus 80% times 90 cents. So that's where we're getting that increase in dividend growth. And then finally in year 6, okay, we're looking at it starting to grow constantly at 7%. So this $1.73 should equal 162 times 1 plus 7%. And hopefully it won't make me a liar. But there you go, 7% on that 162. Okay, so we can look at it from the non-constant perspective, do our present value analysis on each one of those. And then we can look at it, you know, what's the stock price going to be out in year 6? It's going to become constant, so we can use the Gorton model on that. And then take the present value of that future stock price in year 6, add it to our other dividend streams, and come up with the stock price today. Okay? And as it says here, the present value of dividends, year 3, year 4, year 5, and the horizontal value, which they have here called out, where it's out becoming constant growth at 917. Okay? So, no need to calculate year 1 and 2 because it's 0. Calculate the present value of year 3. Okay? And you can see where it's using period of time. It's 3, future value. You're solving for present value. You have 16% IY. So you come up with, I forgot the number, come up with 32 cents. Doing the same for year 4. Right? N equals 4. Future value is 90 cents. 16 IY, payment 0, solve for PV for that. And then finally, for year 5, we do the same thing for that. And then we calculate, using the Gorton model, what our price of the stock is out in year 6. Okay? It's going to be the dividend in year 5 times 1 plus the growth rate to give us D6. RS 16% minus 7% gives us 9. 173 divided by 9 is $19.26. Then we take the present value of that. I'll show you that. Remember, it starts after 5, 19 present value, or future value, 16% IY gives you the present value. And you add them all up. And there it shows all the additions. Okay, so that's Simpkins. Simpkins stock. Questions on that one?
Professor Kerwin, will you share this spreadsheet? I did this all by hand, and I'm so close, but didn't quite get it. And I think it would just be helpful to see the way you did it in Excel with the formulas.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'm writing that on the board. Any other questions? Okey-doke. Is it me or are you guys very quiet tonight?
We're all stressed out.
You're all stressed out?
Yes.
Agreed.
I've never found something more confusing, more fascinating, and hated it all at the same time.
It's a beautiful mull of emotions.
Yes.
Although, who shared it with some financial friend? Did you share with somebody?
This?
Yeah.
No. I shared it with you and you gave me a cryptic note.
No.
It took 24 hours to figure out.
No.
Yeah, 24 hours.
I love things I can't understand.
What is this, saw?
No, somebody said they shared one of the PowerPoint slides with
Oh,
some friend, and they said they really liked it.
I shared one of your slides with my brother.
Okay.
He was like, oh, I would love that class. Like,
Literally, I don't think.
There we go.
Die.
You won't.
You're good on the cryptic node and 24 hours to figure it out though, right?
Yeah, that was good.
Are we good on that, or
Yeah,
it sounds like you're still holding stuff in?
I was gonna say forgiven, isn't forgiven.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, it was just very cryptic. I was like, we're gonna get points off this. Jack was like, just give it some time.
Yeah, if I'm too cryptic, let me know, right? I don't understand what you're saying.
No, I was like angry emailing you last night. I was about to break my computer. I was like, I cannot figure this out. And then literally to myself, I was like, hey, please disregard. I got it back.
Yeah. Oh, you must get that a lot.
Well, yeah, it does have different effects on people. Some it
This
improves
makes
their
us angry.
improves their prayer life. Others it improves their swearing. I'm sure I'm called all kinds of things in the background, and that's okay.
My cats won't say anything.
That's loud, sorry.
Okay, but I mean, at the end of the day, all we're doing is we're looking at dividends, because the dividend stream is how a stock pays you money, and that's how you analyze it, right? So if it's not giving any dividends for a while, you can't do much with it. But once it starts giving you dividends in out in this forecasted future state, you can then determine the present value of it to make some decisions on whether or not, hey, this is good, this is something good, or maybe something you want to change or move forward on.
I think this one was the most difficult for me though, because I got $19.20 for the final answer, and that's why I was like,
Ah,
yeah, so,
did you land here?
nope, and that's why those numbers were higher.
But you did see what I did here, though, right?
It's easier now since seeing it, but at home, I don't know how you got this answer, but,
I was YouTubing people.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
really
really
helpful.
explain this correctly either, like,
Different way, huh?
yeah.
Gotcha. Did the Benny case help?
Not really.
I found one YouTube video where the girl was, I don't know, it was just something that clicked at one point, because I'm telling you, I was pissed off and frustrated.
Sandra.
And then like something just
There's a lot of
clicked,
work.
and when I got the answer, I was like, what? I got this, I was so shocked. But it's just because of the adding and
Right,
all the different steps, I think it's,
right.
and then I had to like take a minute and then go
Yeah.
back to it.
Breathe, come back to it. Yep.
I almost threw my books up.
Yeah.
Back to it.
You, I don't know if this is reassuring, but you won't see this again in this class.
Ever? Not even in the mini case?
You mean capital financial?
No, not in the capital budget either.
That one, yeah, that's what I meant.
No.
See?
No, kind of one and done. Okay, but I haven't gotten to the cost of capital yet. So, all right. Any other feedback? Okay, let's go to 714. Now, this a little bit easier, right? Value preferred stock, rolling riders issued preferred stock with stated annual dividend of 10% of its $100 par value. Preferred stock of this price currently yields 8%. Assume the dividend is paid annually. This is kind of like a hybrid between stock and bonds and how they're calculated. So, what's the estimated value of this preferred stock? Well, it has a par value of $100. Its annual dividend is $10. Okay. Required rate of return is 8%. Given currently yields that. So my estimated value of preferred stock equals that dividend divided by rate of return, giving us $125, $125. And then finally, suppose interest rate levels have risen to the point where the preferred stock now yields 12% instead of 8%. Okay, what will be the estimated value of the stock now? Again, the only thing that has changed is the required rate of return, giving us 83.33. Okay. That wasn't as bad as the last one. Okay, good. That was your homework. In a couple short minutes, as opposed to the short minutes that you had doing it. I'm gonna save that. Okay. We ready to rock and roll on to cost of capital? Okay. After this, we'll have, what time is it? Oh, it's 10 after 7. I thought it was 20 after 7 for some reason. Time
You're
flies.
ahead of schedule?
Yeah, we're gonna have to slow down. I need more questions from you.
You're kind of stuck.
Okay. All right. I think we've looked at this, haven't we? We've looked at this. We've looked at this. Oh, no, we haven't looked at it. Okay.
I have a question about like, homework, is it like right or wrong kind of grading?
Is it right or wrong?
Like, but like, no, I know, but like if the work, like you see where.
If I see all your work and stuff and you landed close or not quite there, it's just a few nicks. Nothing,
Just a flush one.
just a small flesh wound. Nothing, nothing that's gonna hemorrhage. No, you don't get the whole problem wrong. And that's why I ask you to show all your work. That way, if there's just some small area made up at the top and you've carried it through, you know, it's the process. Heard that a lot. It's the process. Okay, cost of capital. All right, so here, cost of capital, we're going to look at some components that contribute to the cost of capital. Now, we have looked at debt, loans, right, or debt loans. We looked at preferred stock, and we looked at common equity. Now, depending on which side of the, which side of the debt or capital component you're on, you're either receiving a rate of return or you're paying out a cost of that, okay? So for your student loans, right, you're paying out a rate, an interest rate. So that's a cost of using that money. We've talked about that, right? Whether they're 5% or 8%. You know, at the dollar level, you're spending 5 cents for every dollar you're using, or 8 cents for every dollar you're using. On the other side of the equation, M&T Bank, per se, who granted you that loan, right, is getting a return of 5 or 8 cents per dollar. Okay, so depending on whether you're the the loaner or the borrower, is how you look at that rate. It's either rate of return or cost. Okay, so we're going to look at it from the perspective of I'm Netflix, and I want to raise money. I want to raise capital, right? And I'm going to use these mechanisms to raise capital. I'm going to use debt in the form of loans. I'm going to use preferred stock, and I'm going to use common stock. And by issuing these type of components, there's a cost for each one of them, right? Debt has a certain cost to it. Preferred stock has a different certain cost to it, so it's common equity. Now, what you can do is I can take my mix of these different components, and I can weight them, W-E-I-G-H-T, put a weight on them, right? And I will have the weighted average cost of capital. Okay? So let's just say it's coming to Thanksgiving, and I have readied myself for pie eating. Okay? We have apple pie. We've got pumpkin pie. Pecan, we have pecan. We don't have sweet potato because we have the pumpkin. Always goes back and forth in my family, but I've learned happy wife, happy life. That's right. So let's just say,
Covered in marshmallows. My mother puts less sugar.
yeah, I say pie and look at
She does it like.
Sorry.
that. Marshmallows on it, you have this, you have that. Okay, so let's just say that of my pie eating, right? And generally the pie eating happens. All right, you guys can go. So my pie eating, which generally happens during the second game, okay? So my pie eating can be divided up, right? Let's just say I like pumpkin, so I'm going to have half of my pie eating pumpkin, okay? And a quarter of my pie is going to be apple, and another quarter of my pie is going to be pecan. Okay, right? So of my entire pie, of my entire cost of capital, right? I am eating 50% pumpkin, 25% pecan, and 25% apple. Okay? Everybody tracking with me so far? So here, I'm going to start applying how much of a weight I may use on loans, preferred stock, and common stock. Okay? Now, the other mix I'm going to pull into this, which is going to be difficult with the pie analogy, is the impact or the cost of eating that pie. Okay? So, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. But anyway, there's a cost of eating a half a pumpkin pie. Right? Might weigh me down a little bit more. You know, might be a big cost, right? Apple might not have such a big impact because it's fruit in there, right? Pecan, I mean, nuts are good for you, right? So, well, aren't they? Aren't nuts good for you? So here, you know, there might be certain impact. You know, let's just put a metric on it. You know, let's just say I'm going to get hit, you know, 25%, whatever that is. Maybe this is only 10%, and this is only 15%. Okay? And maybe this metric is based on people yelling at me because I ate that much pie, right? 25% of the people said you ate too much pie of the pumpkin because they liked that more. 10% the pecan, and then 15% the apple. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to kind of use it here in analyzing and figuring out what my capital components are. Okay? Now, here's another one. I don't know if I can do this circle again, but we'll try it. Okay, let's look at it. Not good.
No, you were thinking about it.
I was thinking about it. I was thinking about it. All right, here's your student loan.
Looks like a pumpkin.
Right? Here's your student loan. Let's say your student loan is $100,000. Yeah. Okay? So you got $50,000, $25,000, $25,000, right? So $25,000, grandma. Grandma gave it to you, right? No interest. So how much does that $25,000 cost you?
25.
Zero.
Yeah.
Didn't cost you anything, right? She gave it to you as a gift. Let's just say this 25K was 5%. It's a loan. So a nickel on every dollar. That's what's costing you that, right? Here, this 50,000, let's just say that's 2%. 2 cents on every dollar, right? Now, for me to determine how much it costs me for that $100,000, and I'm paying it all, I'm not paying it off quick or anything like that, it's just paid off in the regular term. For me to figure out how much that costs me is a combination of 50,000 at 2%, 25,000 at 5%, and 25,000 at 0%. Okay, because not all this money is costing me 2 cents on a dollar. Not all this money is costing me 5 cents on a dollar. And not all this money is free. Okay, so that's another analogy of where we're going here. Okay, so we got the setup, we got the pies, we got the student loans. Where are we going to go? Weighted average cost of capital, weighted average cost of capital, weighted average cost of eating pie, right? So we're going to look at some factors that affect that, and what would we do to adjust for risk. So that's where we're going. Okay, this is chapter 9. Big picture, kind of talked about this. Weighted average cost of capital is loans plus preferred stock plus common stock. Okay, here's the equation. Okay, we're gonna break it up into digestible parts. Okay, so we have 2 weighted average cost of capitals. We have weighted average cost of capital 1, which is the weight of debt. You're not leaving us, are you?
No.
Okay. We have the weight of debt. Some people leave at this time. We have the weight of debt, we have the cost of debt, right? The rate or the cost of debt times 1 minus the tax rate, okay? The reason this portion has a tax calculation in it is just because of loan, right? What do we know about loans and interest rate? Well, besides they suck, they're tax deductible, right? So your loan, your student loans, there's tax incentives on that, right? Okay, so that's the debt portion. Then our second piece is the weight of preferred stock times the cost of preferred stock. And then finally, we're going to add the weight of common equity. This is going to be the rate of retained earnings. Okay. We're going to keep going through this.
RPS, weight, you said weight over,
This is
weight
the
of preferred stock.
weight of preferred stock times the cost of preferred stock. Okay.
What's the WZ? It's the weight of the, what's the D stand for?
Weight of debt. Okay.
What's the CD?
Weight of common equity. Okay. This is the cost of retained earnings.
Retained earnings.
Retained earnings. Remember income statement? Retained earnings?
You multiply those with the weight of common equity.
Correct. Correct. That's
What did the WD and the RD stand for?
weight of debt, cost of debt. And 1 minus tax. We're going to go slow on this, and then I'm going to expand it out even more. And I'm going to add color too. So, big crayons, right? Whenever you report upward management, you always use bigger crayons the farther up you go. Okay? So, that's WAC 1, weighted average cost of capital 1. That'll mean something probably by the end of the time we're here. Okay? Weight of average cost of capital for 2, there's no difference on the first part. There's no difference on the second part. But the last part, the weight of common equity, this is the cost of external common stock or the issuing of new stock. Okay.
RS was what? Up
Rate
top.
of return.
Rate of
Rate of
Retained earnings.
return, that's right.
It has an S, but it doesn't really map to retained earnings, right? So, okay.
The PS was preferred stock
PS is preferred stock,
and the RE is
external. Cost of external stock. Okay. Okay. Okay, let's look at it one more time. Okay. All I did was color code and made it hopefully a little more clear, right? So here we got WAC 1 and WAC 2, same formula, right? This is the debt or the bonds portion of the calculation. This is the preferred stock portion of the calculation. Notice on WAC 1 and WAC 2, they are the same. Okay? Here, on the common equity, right? Common equity being common stock, okay? Or retained earnings, right? On the top part, WAC 1 is based on money I already have. Retained earnings, okay? So if I'm Netflix and I've got money, right? I still have to determine how much that money costs me, okay? And there's ways of doing it. People remember the capital asset pricing model I threw at you last week. That is a way of determining how much that money costs, okay? there's a couple of other ways to determine how much that money costs. Again, this is stuff I've retained, okay? Discounted cash flow, I'll show you that. Risk premium is another approach. So these are just 3 methods on how to determine the cost of that. And ultimately, in our capital budget project, you'll be calculating these 3 and then taking the average of all 3 of them. So that's just kind of a, what do you call it, a breadcrumb, or breadcrumb as you're looking back. What's it, an egg? When I'm putting something in a movie, that's
Easter egg?
Easter egg. This is an Easter egg. Okay. Good? Everybody somewhat there? Okay.
Wait, I have a question.
Yes.
So on the slide before that one, right?
Yes.
So at the end, you have as R for WAC 2 as the cost of external stock, right?
Yes.
But then if you go back to the slide that you just showed, it's backwards. Does it matter?
Did I screw it up?
You see how WAC 1?
Oh, good catch. Thank
See,
you.
I'm paying attention.
Nice.
No.
R.
Right?
Did I have that wrong? Wait a minute. R.
No, so no. So no, you know, because no, you said you have R, you have.
R S and R E.
Yeah.
R S and R E.
It's right, it is right.
Oh, yeah, you know what, I'm looking at.
You had me though. I was thinking it was wrong.
Okay, no, it's like, because on the material, on here it says, it has them together, it says RS or RE.
R S or
Yeah,
R E.
Okay,
Okay.
so when using on WAC 2.
Yep.
That will, that means that it's a cost of external stock,
That's correct.
right?
The
But when
cost
using on
of-
WAC 1.
Yep.
That means that it return earnings.
That's correct.
That was my question.
Okay. Good. You're there. Any other questions? Okay. Hopefully that made it a little easier. All right. Kind of dividing it up. Okay. Now next, from a weighted average cost of capital perspective, we're going to find that our WAC $2, what the cost of that is. WAC 1, thank you. WAC $1 plus our WAC $2 are going to equal the cost of capital used to determine what my capital budget is. So I'm kind of floating up here real high, right? On this weighted average cost of capital. Going back to here, right? Kind of the student loan and the pie analogy, right? I'm taking a cost of capital of these components. In the mix is money I have, or common equity I have, right? I'm going to add to it any need to issue new stock. It's going to impact the cost of weighted average cost of capital, $2. And these two together will be used to determine what my capital budget is. Okay? What you're going to find in the homework is going to be asking you questions specifically to the certain elements, not to the whole equation itself yet. Questions? Yes, hand in the back.
So this is our capital budgeting project Easter egg.
Yes. This is coming to a theater near you.
I see.
Okay. The excitement, right?
So excited.
Okay. Now, because we've been here, right? We've done cost of debt, right? Loans. We've done RD, essentially, in some of our assignments from chapter 5 and chapter 5. We've done it for debts, right? or loans. We've done preferred stock in chapter 7. We've also done common stock in chapter 7. Okay, so now we're starting to bring them together. Okay, so those are the two equations. Here they are split out. Okay, key difference between the two. Up top, this is based on, debt that I have, preferred stock that I have, and then common equity that I have. Okay, I look at the cost, evaluating that cost of equity based on different tools, like a CAPM tool, discounted cash flow tool, or risk premium tool. Bottom part is debt that I have, preferred stock that I have, and the addition of common equity where I have to issue new stock. Okay. We want to land at 7:30 for our break. Okay, capital components are sources of funding that come from investors. Okay. Accounts payable, accruals, deferred taxes are not sources for this funding. Okay. These are adjusted for in cash flows, and we look at that in chapter 10. So those are not pieces to our capital components. Tax effects associated with financing can be incorporated either in the capital budgeting or in the cost of capital. Remember, we saw the 1 minus T, so it's incorporated there. So only cost of debt is affected. Remember, let's go back. Only the cost of debt is affected by taxes. The others are not. Okay. All right, let's kind of walk through this and integrate it into our equation. Okay. Remember, we're looking at this equation, okay, and we're going to figure out some of the variables. So here we have a bond, okay, 15-year, 12% semi-annual bond, sells for $11.53 at $11.53.72. We see that this bond, it's going to be $1,000 par value. We see that the bond is selling at a premium of $11.53. What's the cost of that bond? Okay, well, we solve for IY. That's the cost. It's 15-year semi-annual, so 30 is our period of time. Our present value is $11.53. Our payment, double the semi-annual, so it's 15 years. So it is payment equals 15. Where's our payment? Why am I at 60? 15 years semi-annual. I should be at 30. I'm sorry, 30 is the payment. Payment 12%, so it's $120 a year, $60 per payment, semi-annual, $1,000 future value. I solve for IY, it's 5% times 2. The cost of that bond is 10%. RD is 10%. Okay? So we're going to put that into our equation.
And was, what is the years?
And it is a year, it's 30 years.
Oh,
I'm
like
going to come up with 5%, but I got to multiply it by 2. Okay? Because it'll come up at 5% for semi-annual.
But it should have been 60 something, right?
What should be 60?
Shouldn't that be 60 if you're multiplying?
No, and it's 15
Oh,
years.
it's 15 years, okay.
I'm sorry, I messed up people. And it's double for 15, right? Your present value stays the same. Your payment is split in half.
Right.
So you would have to figure out what 12% is of that, and then
To get the coupon rate,
yeah,
which is 120.
and then divide by 2.
So that's why so you have to figure out the.
Yeah, here's the inputs, right, that I have on the top. Then my output will be 5%. You want to run it?
Yeah.
Let's run it.
Yay.
Get your calculators ready. On, off. Clear. Make sure you clear your work. Second, clear work. Second, clear TBM. Second, quit. Okay, ready? 30, end. 11, 53, 72. Put a minus on it. It's an outflow. Make that PV. Okay, hit PV. Your coupon rate is 12%. So that's $120. But I'm getting it twice a year. So I have to divide it by 2. Right? So $60. So 60 payment. $1,000 is your future value. Okay. Now we're going to compute IY. Dun, 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 dun. So it's giving me 5% semi-annually. I got to double that to make it annual. Okay.
Oh, so you're timing it by 2 because it's already semi-annual, so to make it annual.
Right.
Gotcha, okay.
I can't remember if it was the last week or the week before. When it's in a semi-annual bond, you double N, 2 times N, IY divided by 2, right? PV untouched, payment divided by 2, future value untouched. Okay? So, let's just kind of mark some of this down here. So we have figured out what RD is, right? RD is 10%. Writing this on the board. Sorry, Joanna. Joanna, you still with us?
Yes, I'm still here. Sorry, my mic was on mute. Hopefully someone's taking pictures for me.
Take a picture when it's complete, or you just started writing.
We just started writing. You'll have it in a minute.
Okay.
Okay? RD is 10%. Okay. Next, cost of preferred stock, right? So, here's our variables for cost of preferred stock. We know that the price is $116.95. We know that our dividend is 10%. We know the par value is $100, and we know there are flotation costs involved in this preferred stock. Okay, so they threw a little flotation
What is
cost.
that? Oh, so the F is the flotation.
F is the flotation cost.
What is the flotation?
Flotation cost is when you have to issue new stocks, and a separate institution gets a fee for doing that. The administrative stuff, cutting the paper, certifying it, all that kind of stuff. So by formula, the cost of that preferred stock is equal to that dividend, right? Divided by the cost of preferred stock, the price of preferred stock times 1 minus the flotation. So we've been given our particular variables. Our dividend for that is 10% of the par value, okay? So 0.1 times $100. Then it'd be my price, $116.95 times 1 minus 5%. Run my calculations. I get $10 here. I get 111 on the denominator. Do my division. I come up with 9%. 0.09 is equal to 9%. Okay. So kind of a long-handed, that's the formula for cost of that preferred stock. Now I have RPS equals 9%. Okay, so it's costing me 10 cents on a dollar for my loans, RD. It's costing me 9 cents on a dollar for my preferred stock. Okay, everybody tracking? Okay, next. 2 ways that a company can raise common equity: directly by issuing new shares of common stock, or indirectly by reinvesting earnings that are not paid out as dividends, i.e. retained earnings. WAC 1 versus WAC 2. Okay, so we're going to figure out the cost of each of those. Earnings can be reinvested or paid out. Investors could buy other securities, so they're looking for what am I, potentially losing, or what's the opportunity cost when you reinvest those dividends or retained earnings. Okay, so you're not paying out dividends, you're going to reinvest it, right? So that's where it comes up with, well, I have to figure out how much it's going to cost me to do that and show that to my investors so that they can understand it as an opportunity cost. Let's play that out. Okay. Opportunity cost is the return stockholders could earn if they were able to look at alternate investments of equal risk. Okay. They could buy similar stocks that are in the same cost, that have the same rate of return. They could repurchase, et cetera, et cetera. What I want to get to is kind of the formulas on this. Okay. So here, okay, since I am not going to pay, I'm Netflix, okay? Since I'm not going to pay out dividends, I'm going to use that money internally to use on programs and projects, right? So there's a cost I have to determine on that to demonstrate to you that I'm analyzing it from the perspective as if I gave you that money and you could go out and use it somewhere else. Okay? For instance, if I come back to you and say, well, I'm reinvesting this stuff and I'm figuring it's going to cost me 10%, okay? But you're evaluating it from a perspective that, gosh, I could use that money and make 15%. Then you're probably going to say, you know, I'm moving on from you, Netflix. Okay? So I have to kind of show, and here's 3 ways of doing it, show you that I am reinvesting that at a cost that's very similar to what you could go out and reinvest it yourself. Okay? That makes sense? Somewhat? Close?
I'm lost.
I'm using your money. Okay? You know that you can go out and gain a rate of return of 15%. I've got to demonstrate to you that by using your money, I'm using it at a cost of 15%. Okay? So what I'm doing with your money, I'm going to reinvest it or use it and suggest that it's worth 15% into my programs and services, et cetera, to get you a return on that. Okay? So I got to demonstrate the integrity of analyzing your money as opposed to giving you dividends. I'm going to keep your money for another couple of years for programs and projects, right? Whatever they may be. You know, new offerings in Netflix, et cetera. So if you're not happy with that analysis and how I'm using your money, then you can take that elsewhere. So it's up to me to figure how can I keep that money, use it, and keep you as an investor. Okay? And these are the tools that we'll use to analyze what that money's worth. Okay? One is the capital asset pricing model. One is the discounted cash flow model. And one is the risk premium model. Each of these, the variables will be given to do your calculations. Each of these provide a cost of that retained earnings. Notice the CAPM, RS, of cost. Risk-free rate, risk market premium, risk-free rate times the beta coefficient, okay? Discounted cash flow. There's a cost here that I'm coming up with. That cost is based on a dividend, a price of the stock, plus a growth rate, okay? Finally, the long-winded one, which kind of has the shorter formula. This has a mix of bonds, some judgmental risk premiums included in it. So that cost, RS, is equal to cost of this plus the bond rate. Look at these as just tools for analyzing and coming up with a cost for using money. Okay? Stay with me. There may be an aha moment at the end. And there may not be. Okay. So, using the capital asset pricing model, I can determine my cost of equity based on this formula. I have a risk-free rate of 5.6%. I have a risk market premium of 6%. And the industry that, let's say, Netflix is in has a beta coefficient of 1.2. Each of these, we could go up to Investopedia, and they would give you definitions of each of these things. Okay? For the sake of time, we're going to use our variables into our equation to find out what the cost is using the CAPM method. Okay? So by equation, risk-free rate is 5.6% plus 1 times the beta coefficient, not 1, I'm sorry, 6% times 1.2, which is the beta coefficient, gives me 12.8. So using CAPM, all right, I'm going to put up retained earnings on the board. If I use the CAPM approach by formula, RS is equal to 12.8%. How are we doing on time?
7:25.
Thank you. We're doing good. Okay? So retained earnings, money that I have, using the CAPM approach, that money that I am retaining, I'm not going to give you in dividends. If I just use the CAPM approach, that money's worth 12.8 cents on every dollar. Okay? Got it? Whoop, sorry. Whoa. All right, now let's just say I use the discounted cash flow approach, or DCF. What's the cost of that money if I use DCF? Well, cost of this money using the discounted cash flow, which should look very similar to our Gorton model, right? Solved for cost. Bless you. Bless you again. 3 times. All right, so our initial dividend is $3.12. Our price initially is $50. And then our growth model is 5.8%. So here I'm kind of comparing it to probably stock I already have, right? To say, okay, the current stock I have has a cost of, come up with it, right? Using my Gorton model. So I'll run the numbers. Dividend in year 1 divided by the initial price of the stock plus the growth rate is equal to, dividend of year 1 is equal to dividend initially times 1 plus the growth rate. 312 times 1 plus the growth rate, 5.8%, divided by that $50 plus 5.8%. 312 is the dividend in year 1. I'm sorry, 312 times 1.058. Dividend in year 1 divided by $50 plus the growth rate. Multiply and divide before we add and subtract. 6.6% times 5.8. So my cost of retained earnings, if I was just to use discounted cash flow, would be 12.4%. Good?
Can you switch back to the CAPM slide really quick? I just want to take a picture of it. Thank you.
I'll send this out to you by noon tomorrow too.
Please.
You know that. You've been getting them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have I kept my promises?
Yeah.
Pretty close?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Not you, the material.
I won't take a quick one.
It's not you, it's me.
It's not you. It's not you, it's us. Okay, you with me so far though? I have estimated the cost of my retained earnings dollar using 2 tools so far. Number 1 was the CAPM and number 2 is, or 2 methods so far, right? Okay. Are you good with CAPM? Last but not least, personally, I think they put too much verbiage into it for the amount of time you spend with this one. Same thing, it's another tool. It's called the owner bond yield plus judgmental risk premium method. Okay? It's equal to, the cost of that money using this method is whatever my rate or my cost of bonds are plus a judgmental risk premium. Okay? So what's interesting about this is our rate of our bonds is, or our cost of our bonds is 10%. They also give it here too. Cost of our bonds is 10% plus 3.2 is the risk premium, which they've added. So here, I'm just gonna call it risk premium.
Wait, so they're literally just adding the two numbers?
Literally,
You
but,
just tell us that, 13.2.
well, I could, but I'm giving you some context that this is another method where I'm estimating the cost of that money using the rate of the bond right now, the cost of the bond, plus a risk premium on top of it. That's all. Other than just giving it to you. Okay, so that cost of money, 13.2%. Okay,
So you can do any of these?
they're all different,
Yeah, so,
right?
yeah.
You could use them on their own, or you got it? Okay. Remember back here at the big picture, the Easter egg I provided you? Right? Okay.
If they're using the same variable, why are they so different?
What do you mean use the same?
Aren't they using kind of like the same components?
Not really.
Well, the risk premium wasn't in
What
there.
will determine which one you use, I guess?
Based on in the context of this course, when you have a problem, it'll tell you. Okay.
And in real life?
It depends, right? Like behind the scenes, like financial analysis stuff. I mean, when you come to them with whatever amount of money and say, hey, how can I reinvest this? I mean, they're not breaking out their white papers and doing formulas and stuff, right? They got all this stuff in the back, both, right? So they're using different inputs from markets, from, risk-free rate bonds, from government, et cetera, depending on how risky you want to be with your money is what will go into determining that, okay? Now, like, folks have 401ks. Well, you're into this stuff too, right? Nowadays they've got it down to when do you want to retire, right? So they have they have this Vanguard, 2020, about to retire next year, right? So based on that and based on your level of risk will determine what percentage rate you'll get. Did I answer your question?
Mhm.
Or are you just being nice? So each one of these, although they seem like the same variables you're using, you're really not. Okay. And as your problem sets come up, it's not going to be a situation of saying, okay, evaluate the cost of retained earnings. They're going to ask you to evaluate it using capital. Here's all your variables for capital. Okay. Okay. Where were we? Somewhere down here. 12.4, 13.2. Okay. Company issues new stock. Now we're going to get into the bottom side in WAC 2. Okay. Whoop, 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 whoop. Don't show those answers yet. So if we go back up here, now we're going to look at RE. We've already looked at evaluating the cost for retained earnings on the top side, or WAC 1. Now we're going to look at WAC 2. All right, so let's go down to, where were we? Yep, okay. So, company issues new stock. They also have to pay flotation costs to the underwriter. Flotation fees, they use it in the preferred stock already. You're going to have to use that in common stock when you're issuing new stock. So issuing new stock may send a negative signal to capital markets, which may depress the stock price. So depending on the company, what the stock market is doing, when you issue new stock, there may or may not be risk associated with that. The book calls out, there might be a negative signal that, hey, you're kind of depressing the stock price because you're putting more stock into the marketplace. Okay, fine. So let's figure out what the cost is of new stock. Okay. So here Gorton model, we're assuming the constant growth. Remember I told you won't see the non-constant formula again? From here on out, it'll be constant, right? So here is the Gorton model. The only difference you're going to be seeing, though, is there is an element of adding for flotation fees, and that's included in the denominator as 1 minus that flotation fee. So, cost of new common equity, or the issuing of new stock. Okay? Given the following variables, my initial price of stock is $50. My initial dividend is $3.12. My growth rate is 5.8%, and my flotation fee is 15%. Okay? Cost of RE, or external cost. Okay, run our numbers. Dividend 1 is equal to DO times 1 plus growth rate, 5.8%. DO is 312 divided by that price of stock of $50 times 1 minus the flotation fee of 15%. Plug in our numbers, multiply and divide before you add and subtract, and you come up with 13.6%. Okay? So we've got all our cost numbers for our formula. Okay? 10% for bonds, 9% for preferred stock, and then here, this is 13.6% for RE, here 12.8 is the average of those three. And I'm just doing that. Okay, I'm just going to take the average of those three for our discussion. You don't always take the average, it depends on the problem set itself. So if I were to take 12.8, 12.4, 13.2, total it, divide by 3, I'm going to get an average of 12.8%.
So that 1.3 is the average of those.
Yep, I'm going to run it.
So, that's what I'm gonna send it to.
What's that?
Wanna run it?
Nope. Trust me on it.
I trust.
Trust me.
I trust.
Trust me. Your grades are in my hands.
Maybe a start.
Okay? So 12.8% there. Now, what are we missing?
Are we missing something?
Well, look at our formula. What are we missing?
The answer?
No? We are missing the answer, but what are we missing on those?
W?
W, our weights, right? What's our weights? Oh, I got rid of my pie. Our weight of bonds, our weight of preferred stock, our weight of common equity. We got all the cost parameters in each one. Now we need to get the weights of each one. Okay? 5 minutes. 5 minutes?
Okay.
3 minutes. 3 minutes?
Do it.
3 minutes, okay, cool.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Do it.
Okay. Weights on the percentages of a firm that will be financed by each component. If possible, always use the target weights for the percentage of the firm based on the what will be financed with the various types of capital. Okay. If you don't know the targets, it's better to estimate the weights using current market values. Key point. We'll always use current market values in this class. Okay? So, suppose the stock price is $50. There are 3 million shares of stock. The firm has 25 million of preferred stock, 75 million of debt. Okay, got it? Let's add them up. $50 of regular stock. We have 3 million shares. That's 150 million. We got 25 million of preferred stock. We got 75 million of loans or debt. Add them all up. We got $250 million. That's our market value of capital that we have. Bless you.
Oh, we're so
We're allergic to this.
Two more?
I'm good.
Go get that one. Okay, so value of common equity, value of preferred stock, value of debt. Okay, we've taken those market values, we've come up with a total value. So what are we going to do next? We're going to take each one and divide it by the whole. I got 150 out of 250, 25 out of 250, and 75 out of 250. I said I'd do it in 3 minutes. Okay? Everybody see how I got that? Okay, let me go back. I got $50.
$50 divided by 252.
Wait a minute, hold on. I got a stock price of $50. I got 3 million shares out there. 50 times 3, 150 million, right? I got 25 million in preferred. And then I got 75 million of debt. Okay? So now I'm taking those 3 elements or components, 150, 25, and 75.
That's why I said.
Bless you. What's going around?
Contagious.
Yes. 150 plus 25 plus 75. 250 million. That's my market value of capital. Okay? Now all I'm doing is taking each one as a percentage of the whole, and that's giving me my weight. Right? Weight of common stock, 150, divided by 250 is 60%. Weight of preferred, 25 over 250, and then weight of debt, 75 over 250. Okay? So, WS is 60%. What's WPS?
10%.
10%. WD? You're supposed to say 40%. Get it? WD 40? All right, it's late. Try to pitch on Fridays. Okay. So we got our weights, we got our cost, we got a formula. We got 1 minute to go. Uh-oh, this could slow us down.
Really
Question.
quick, how did we get 250 there?
250 was
Oh, add them up.
the 150, the 25, and the 75. Good question. This really isn't that bad once you think about it, right?
What?
You know what? It's
It's a
really
lot at
bad.
once. It's a lot at
Tomorrow when we're doing the homework, or the next day when we're doing the homework, and we go, wait a minute, how did we do that?
You know what? It's good that you're doing the homework tomorrow or the next day. Because if you do it on Saturday or Sunday, I get, you know, emails and questions and texts and trying to watch the Bills lose and everything else.
Hey, relax.
And I was there, okay, and I was cold and wet.
And Yeah.
It's like you just came back from the war or something.
yeah, that makes it tough because when you win, it isn't that bad, but when you lose, it's worse. Okay, we good? We good so far? We got the W's? So we go back in, we plug them in, right? So weight times rate or cost times 1 minus 40. Where did I get the 40? 40% tax rate. Okay? It was given. Okay? I probably didn't call it out very well, but it's a 40% tax rate. Same on both. Same on WAC 1, same on WAC 2. Preferred stock. 10% weight, 9% cost. Same on both. Here's where it differentiates. Weight is the same, 60%. However, this is money that I've retained, but I've used these different tools to figure out how much it will cost me. Okay? 12.8%, 12.8 cents on every dollar. Here, I have to issue new stock, 13.6%. Where do we get that? From over there, and we got that from right here, right now. 13.6, there it is. Okay, Okay? So, this amount of money that I have retained is costing me 10 cents or 10.38 cents on every dollar. This amount of money over and above this amount, over and above the amount of retained earnings I have, is costing me 10.86% or 10.86 cents on every dollar. Now you're going to say, well, so? But you add a few zeros to that amount? That's big money. Okay? So as we get forward in evaluating, 10.38 cents on gazillion dollars versus 10.86 cents, quite a difference. Okay? Questions? I think we're not going to worry about that. Not going to worry about that. That's just verbiage. We're going to get to mini case 9 after the break. Everybody good? Bio, spray, get your food. How about be back in here next? And then we'll continue onward.
Oh my God, you're going to Wendy's? Buy me fries. Not like I just ate so much.
That looks pretty good.
Exactly.
I'm debating whether I want coffee. If I have coffee, then I can't go to sleep when I eat here.
I belong here to get you coffee.
Well, I know, but then I can't sleep here. I like to sleep.
Also, my boss had me all stressed out because
Why?
he just texted me and said I talked to our VP and HR, and he wants me in his office tomorrow morning at 8:45 to make sure we're all on the same page.
They're gonna give you enough.
Wait a minute, is this your new boss or your old boss?
My old boss.
Why are you stressed?
I don't like cryptic things. Like, I don't like things that can be left up to my imagination, so that my imagination goes wild. Like, I'm sitting here thinking they're gonna tell me, okay, time for you to leave and walk me out.
No, they're gonna offer you more money to
You know what I would
I
do?
feel like me telling him 3 times that there was literally nothing that they could offer me should have been enough, so that I think I'm pissed off if that is what they're
No,
doing.
here's what I would do. And this is what I do when I get invites that have no agendas. I go back and say, I'll be willing to attend this. Let me know how best I can prepare for it.
That's a good call.
I mean, these people are making good money. They should be able to provide you an agenda. That's
Especially because now I don't know
that's simple
if HR
PM
and
stuff.
our VP gonna be in there.
Aren't you a PM?
I am a PM,
And aren't you leading a big PM group?
which is ironic because I did that to one of my clients today when she sent me a meeting invite. I said, I'm happy to attend, but you need to tell me what I need to prepare for the meeting.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, you can use that the same with your current boss. That's just a sign of respect for me.
He just makes me
'Cause I
precious.
got too many people that you give them an agenda and they come in and blow it up.
Oh, yeah, I hate that.
You know,
One of
it's
my
like,
clients does that.
what were we here to cover, you know? But that's what I always do. And I did that with way back when with a boss, because I had no idea. And you know what? The reason he gave me an agenda because he gave me a raise. So now, back then, I knew that every time he engaged me on a non-agenda meeting, I knew that I was gonna
He's gonna get a raise?
Yep.
Well, he does it to me like all the time. He'll like message, like during work, he'll message, get a raise up in my office for a minute, and then I'm like, what did I do?
But historically, did you do something wrong?
No.
Okay, then what are you worried about?
Plus, you already resigned.
That's what I was just saying,
Yeah.
like I really shouldn't work, but it's just who I am. I stress about
Well-
things that are out of my control.
Well, I'm leaving these.
Historically,
Seriously, nothing bad can happen from this meeting. Like,
The
really.
only
Well,
thing that
They
can happen
could walk me
is, I was
out.
gonna say, they could walk me out, and so what?
why?
Hey, it'll be fine.
Bye.
But then they have to give you severance,
Ooh, too true.
right?
Do they though?
Yes.
Yes.
They do. They have to still pay
They
you.
pay you the
Yes.
2 weeks, because she gave them.
I gave 3 weeks.
So she gave them 3 weeks, if they
true.
walk her out, they gotta pay her those.
Why would they
3
do
weeks.
that?
Right.
Oh, they wouldn't, because
Okay.
they need somebody to transition all my studies.
Right, they need
So you
KT.
say you're
So they're
fine.
probably, this is what I would suggest. I would go back and how can you best prepare? They may be coming back to you and saying, look, can you stay 4? Right? And you could say, you know what? I'd be happy to stay 4, but I gotta go back and find out if I can do that. And there's gonna be a retention bonus to do that. I want an extra couple thousand for staying another week to help you out.
That's true. I didn't think
We
of
need a
that.
financial term. Give us a financial term she can use in there.
No, I was just gonna say I didn't think of that, especially because
Retention
one of my coworkers said she heard my boss walking with one of the other managers, and he said I'm gonna be very busy the next 3 weeks. And she said at first she didn't think it was about me, but she's the only other person who knows. So she messaged me and she was like, "Did you talk to Mike?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Oh yeah, I heard him complaining already." And I was like, "Oh, how bad." That's probably what it is. Oh, all right. Well, I feel bad now.
Yeah, not for nothing, but you're the one that's leaving. Yeah, there's more value in keeping you there.
Because they gotta retrain somebody. First of all, they gotta go through the whole hiring process. The recruiting and hiring process is the worst thing
Right.
ever in life.
And plus, from a KT perspective, they want you doing your best on it. Knowledge transfer. Because if you don't, then, you know what I'm saying? I think you're in a position of strength, to be honest with you.
I don't like that though.
Well,
I know it's so, and I keep thinking that in my head. I'm like, why do I care what his text message means? Because I resigned. So
yeah, you have that. I would go back and say, if you're gonna pull me into a meeting, what do you want to talk about? What do you want me to prepare?
then again, I didn't tell him. I didn't schedule a meeting when I resigned this morning. I just walked in and I was like, "Hey, got a second?"
Oh, so did you give him a hard copy?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so. I wouldn't get anxious.
Just put it in writing.
I wouldn't get anxious at all.
Oh yeah, no, I handed him. So I walked in and I was like, "Hey, do you have a second?" He was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Can you close the door? Or can I close the door?" He's like, "Only if you're telling me good news." And I was like,
Oh, well,
He looked at me. He goes, "You're not resigning, are you?" I was like, "Yeah."
That's kind of good for me.
I am.
It's good for me.
So is there any way you can send the stuff earlier than noon tomorrow? Just asking for a friend.
Earlier than noon tomorrow? Yeah, I can probably get it maybe out 8:30.
Oh, that'd be
Oh,
great.
yeah,
The
perfect.
boys gone.
Wendy's.
That'd be awesome.
I got leftovers.
Because
I asked them to get me
I'm
from.
unbothered until noon.
If they do, you want to split some?
Enough to get paid.
No, I got pasta, girl. I am so even happy. He was stressed.
Also, I feel like I remember stuff better in the morning.
Professor Kerwin, I have 2 questions.
Not so
Well, 2
much
things.
in the afternoon.
Not necessarily a question. 1, did you get our team project thingy? Because normally I see it come up in the corner when I send it, like halfway through, and I didn't see it. And I did it this time because, as Jesse was saying when I walked in, I forgot about it. So it's done.
Okay, and you sent it out?
Yes, but I didn't see it come through.
You
And I
don't get the
did.
notification when you're given them.
Yes, sometimes the notification comes up, and I saw Joe's, so that's why I'm asking.
I got Joe's. I'm not seeing anything else.
I will send it again.
I'm not. Did you send it to my other account?
No, I didn't think so. I'm like.
I'm not seeing it there either.
All right, I'll check. Oh. I think I sent it to Jan.
That probably didn't get to me.
Well, I'm just looking and I typed in J and the first thing that came up was Janet. I'm like, oh, I probably wasn't paying attention and just.
Well, go to your set. Who did you send it to?
I sent it through like right on, and it doesn't show up in your sent folder when you send it as an attachment that way. Yeah.
Using your
Mhm.
Robert forgot you can use a card on the menu. If my stuff won't get stuck this time.
Hey, there it is. Oh, I definitely sent it to somebody else.
Ow.
And I think 2 of the answers are still wrong. So. I think 2 of the answers are wrong in there. I had another thing.
Did you have another question for him?
Yes, but I forgot what it was.
You're gonna get your quota soon.
On questions?
Or on what you forgot?
Bold.
She doesn't know she's got a meeting with her.
They're gonna offer her more money.
But they're gonna counter.
Well,
They are gonna counter. You know you better be ready.
So the first 2 times he asked me, I said that, and then the third time was after he found out. He called me back and forth. I just want to be sure there's nothing. And he said, okay, so you're telling me you doubled your salary and then took all your studies away. You still wouldn't stay. And I looked at him and I was like, okay, there's nothing reasonable that ACI can do to keep you. He's like, well, what's reasonable to you? I said, life. I'm just going around in circles with you right now. I was like, this is not the point. The point is that I wouldn't be here telling you that I was resigning if I wasn't ready to.
Oh my God, I was gonna ask you, how did that go?
Oh, it was awkward.
What
And he just texted me and said that he would like me in his office tomorrow morning at 8:45 to talk to me and make sure we're on the same page. I don't know.
So you gave him a 2 weeks, did you give him a 2
I
weeks?
gave him 3 weeks notice.
You gave him a 3 weeks notice.
Yes.
That was generous. I thought, what if something's
The boy went to one meeting.
No, you helped me. Wait, what else? What's on your hot stuff? I mean, on your salad.
This part?
Yeah.
It's like bread. Like
Oh,
bread.
okay.
Some ham? Yeah, and jerky.
Oh my God, your pasta was the cutest.
Oh, it was.
Ever.
It was so beautiful. Okay.
I don't
I'm
remember
just
your
gonna
door
go
for
for
Halloween. We're going out for Halloween, but like,
I still
Yeah,
have
that'd be
blood
fun.
ratios. I'm like,
I don't even get trick or treaters, so I can't even
Okay.
get dressed up.
I don't get it either. I'm in around the corner. We're gonna, we go, we've gone to Webster for like the last 11, 12 years.
Oh,
So my brothers, because my niece is so, they're all the same age, so they're all together. And so then I just had that candy. It's like a
See,
tradition.
for me, growing up as a kid, we never got trick or treaters because we lived out in the middle of nowhere. So when I started dating Kevin, he lived in town. So I was super excited for one Halloween. I was able to hand out candy. And he was like,
Yeah, I don't know what to say.
excited. And I was like, you don't understand. I've never been able to do that.
It's really awesome, right?
You wanna just be on hold?
Well,
Oh,
the
yeah.
bus broke down.
At this point,
The bus didn't even leave that small, nice, like, wooden.
Yeah.
Because it was one of those big travel buses. So
the
he
low
had to call
nine,
for,
four,
so that they
raise
could
your
bring a
nine,
different bus. So the guy that put it together was, because I guess they used them for something for Boston, I'm sure for Boston, the same thing happened when we got there, like something happened. I was gonna be talking to the guy, like, are you sure?
Yeah, it's a range.
That whack, rather than have an issue.
So, yeah,
So he was so upset, so we didn't get
you got
to,
like,
we didn't get to. I think like 9:30, so we barely had.
It started so I got it 2 feet in.
It's just a lot. It's like an hour. 8, 11 to put all that food out, cook it, and then.
they're not like-
Got it.
That's how we got So, I was like, oh yeah, this is not, we just break it up. And now we have a tailgate.
On that, I could take 3 and.
So, that area, then we can take everyone.
I'll take.
It was crazy. It was not hard. Then it's not even breaking. So I didn't have a. I don't like to go. I got to get that one. After lunch, my brain died.
So then we can joke to this a bit more.
You see, you get any text from me in the afternoon, because I'm like, checked out. Oh, we get afternoon meetings, and I'm like,
Professor Kerwin, Dave
Yeah.
said they're gonna be late.
Really?
He said Wendy's is popping.
Why did they think they?
well, Dave, see, Dave doesn't know the routine, because he hasn't been here. Jack knows.
Jack knows.
You know what, let's just go without them.
All in
Yeah,
favor?
suffer.
Yeah, I mean, that's the time and address.
But if they
I wish
asked,
I'd known.
I didn't
Yeah.
raise my hand because they didn't give
I mean, they'll understand, they wouldn't have wanted us to wait, I doubt it.
Okay, we ready to go?
Yeah, is there anyone else with me? No,
One,
it's just
two,
her, right?
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's just
He's got birthday brain. He's
Yes.
got birthday brain.
That's true, it is his birthday, so.
Regina. What do you think?
Of course he did come, they said he was.
Do we know what?
Should we wait for him, or what do you think? I haven't heard from you.
She's like, I'm here, I don't care. I'm here.
All right, we'll start rocking and rolling because the mini case is reflective of the PowerPoint slide, just like they usually are. So we'll just kind of rock and roll with that a little bit. Okay. So remember, we just went through all of this. Okay, and the mini case is going to be very similar to all the numbers and everything we just went through. It's just the PowerPoint slide is reflective of the mini case, only for presentation perspective. So if we look at our mini case for chapter 9, and that page is
Is Joe back?
Joe. Are you here?
I'm here.
All right,
Hi, Joe.
Hi.
we're kicking it off. So our mini case is on page 394, and like I mentioned, we'll go through. I think it's but I'm going to add a little extra to it also at the end. So, all right. So here we have Jaina Industries. Okay, has been too constrained by high cost of capital, making capital investments. Recently, though, the capital costs have been declining. The company has decided to look seriously at a major expansion program that has been proposed by the marketing department. Assume that you are an assistant to Leah Jones, the VP of Finance. Your first task is to estimate Jaina's cost of capital. Jones has provided you with the following data, which believes will be relevant to your task. Okay, so here we have the tax rate is 40%. We have the current price of Jaina's 12% coupon semi-annual payment non-callable bonds with 15 years remaining to maturity is $1153.72. Jaina does not use short-term investment bearing debt on a permanent basis. Okay, so these new bonds would be privately placed with no flotation costs. So here we have some semi-annual bonds. Next, we have some preferred stock. Current price of that firm's 10% $100 par value quarterly dividend perpetual preferred stock is $116.95. Jaina would incur flotation costs equal to 5% of the proceeds on a new issue. So we got loans called out, we have tax rate called out, we have preferred stock called out.
Different company names.
Yeah, I'm like, the company name.
I got Jaina here, and what do we got in here?
Where's Harry Davis?
Okay, same thing, no, the numbers are the same.
Yeah, the numbers
Isn't
are
that
the
the same company that we just watched that video on in marketing
Harry
with
Davis?
the suits?
Distracted.
The suits,
That's
no,
Hickey Freeman.
that's Hickey Freeman.
Everything else.
Hickey Freeman, yes, that's Roger Freeman. So we had the preferred stock, then we have common stock selling at $50 per share, last dividend, or initial dividend was $3.12. Dividends are expected to grow at a constant rate of 5.8%. Their beta is 1.2. Yield on treasury bonds is 5.6. Market risk premium is estimated to be 6%. For the owner bond yield plus judgmental risk premium approach, the firm uses 3.2% judgmental risk premium. So you can kind of see variables are coming forward in order for you to solve, okay, and calculate, all right? Target capital structure is 30% long-term debt, 10% preferred stock, and 60% common stock. Here, remember we calculated these weights?
They're giving it to us.
They're giving it to us here, okay? Same thing though, right? 30, 10, and 60. To help you structure the task, Jones has asked you to answer the following questions. What sources of capital should be included when you estimate the weighted average cost of capital? Well, cost of debt, cost of preferred stock, cost of common equity, both from a retained earnings perspective and also from a issuing of new stock perspective, okay? should the component cost be figured on a before tax or after tax basis? The only ones that have tax implications are the cost of debt. Okay, so now we're just going to kind of go down through and did what we did in our PowerPoint slide. You know, interest rate on Jana's debt and what is the component cost of debt for weighted average cost of capital purposes. Our cost of debt, RD. These are based on the variables given to us from the top, right? So here, our period of time, our present value of the debt, our payment, and our future value. This was all given above in the setup here. Current price of the 12% coupon rate, semi-annual payment, non-callable bond, 15 years remaining, 1153 is the present value. So here we got present value, 1153. It was 15 years, it's semi-annual, so we have to double it, right? The payment, 120 because it's 12%, we have to split it in half, gives us 60, and our future value is 1,000. So we basically solve for the rate. Okay. Keep in mind, it's not just the rate equation, but we're multiplying it by 2, because if we didn't multiply it by 2, we would be solving for the rate at the semi-annual period of time. We have to double it for the year. Okay? So that gave us 10%. Here we got 10% cost of debt. Okay? Good so far? Kind of read, you know, wash, rinse, repeat. Okay? This one here, this is just taking a piece of the weighted average cost of capital times the, this is just a piece of it. So here, for relevant cost of debt, is the after-tax cost of new debt. Okay, remember in our formula for bonds, let me go up even farther. It's good that I color-coded these things so I can see them. Okay. Here, all it's asking for is the after-tax cost of debt. The cost of debt is 10%, right? RD is 10%. If we multiply that times 1 minus the tax rate, we get the after-tax cost of debt. So it's 10%, right? Then, when I take out the taxes, the cost of that debt is only 6%. Okay? We didn't include it up here because we included it in the whole formula. This is just taking a portion of it. Okay? Tax rate was 40%. We're taking 10% times that 1 minus that 40%. So it's giving us 60%. And that gives us 60% times 10 equals 6% after tax. Okay, so here it was 10%, but if we just take just the one portion of it after tax, it's only 6%.
Is that extra? Because I don't see that asked.
It's not asked specifically, okay? In the mini case it is. And all this is this one portion of the formula right here. All it is this portion right here. RD times 1 minus T. That's all it's being asked of it. Okay? Okay. Not that. Let's go to the next one. Here comes the Wendy's.
I was like, you're not fair.
I thought it was. Okay, so next we did our RD stuff. We're going to do our preferred stock cost Cost of preferred stock, we knew the dividend was $10, that was given above. Our stock, preferred stock price given, $116.95, and the flotation cost by formula. That preferred dividend, this is a divided sign, divided by the stock price times 1 minus the flotation fees.
Just to keep me honest, I'll double click on that so you can see what the formula is. Okay. And then that 9% is 10 divided by that 111.10. So it gives me a price of preferred stock, 9%. Okay. Next, I'm going to look at the cost of equity internal or retained earnings. And this is where we can identify a couple of different approaches to do that. The CAPM, the discounted cash flow, and the risk premium. Okay. What are 2 primary ways companies raise money, raise common equity? Well, we can use what we retain, or we can go out and issue new stock. There's a cost associated because if I'm going to use your money, I got to demonstrate that I'm going to use it from a perspective of what you would potentially earn on it. You as a rate, myself as a cost. Let's see here. Jana doesn't plan to issue new shares of common stock. So using the CAPM, capital asset pricing model approach, what's their estimated cost of equity? By equation, CAPM is equal to the risk-free rate plus the market risk premium times the beta. You can bring that down into the formula of risk-free rate plus risk premium times the beta. We're given those. 5.6%, 6%, 1.2. 5.6 plus the 6% times 1.2. You multiply, divide before you add and subtract. And you end up with 12.8%. For CAPM, if I go down one more, I'm just kind of cruising along here unless you stop me. Discounted cash flow approach. Here's where we're using the Gordon model, but we're solving it for rate. In this case, that rate is equal to a cost. I have an initial stock price of $50, an initial dividend of $3.12, growth rate 5.8%. My dividend in year 1 is equal to my dividend in year 0 times 1 plus the growth rate.
Are you calculating that?
Yeah, or is that given?
Or is that given?
Right here. I'm calculating 312 times 1 plus the growth rate. Okay. So I got my 330 divided by my stock price of $50 plus the growth rate. Run my numbers. 12.4%.
So for the homework, if we have one like this, we'll have to calculate the P. I'm sorry, I can't read that.
No, the PO is given.
PO is given.
Okay, so all those should be given if we have separate D1.
Those are your variables.
Oh, all right.
D1 is equal to D0 times 1 plus 5.8. Okay? Now what you're going to find in the homework is they're going to be asking you questions, not the whole formula. They're going to just be asking you pieces of the formula.
Oh.
So that's why you have a little more in chapter 9. They're just going to be asking you specific questions within the formula, not the whole formula itself. Kind of like what we're doing here. Yeah, kind of like what we're doing right now. Okay. Retention growth, there is no application here for us, so I'm going to go right by it. Okay. Because we have CAPM, we have discounted cash flow, and then we get to the bond yield
Premium, given, 3.2% above. Bond yield, we know is the cost of the bond is 10%. We figured that out. Add the two together and we get 13.2%. Okay. So what is your final estimate for the cost of internal equity, or RS, or retained earnings? All one and the same. You take the average of those three, just like we did below here.
Whoever Trevor is. I don't know who Trevor is.
Sorry.
There they are.
We went to the slow food joint, not the fast food one.
Not a problem. You're not. We're going through the mini case right now, and it's a reflection of what our PowerPoint was.
Yes.
Okay.
There you go.
French fries distributed. All good.
We didn't put Katie in a good mood. That was the goal.
There we go. We didn't do too bad, actually. So CAPM plus the discounted cash flow plus the bond yield premium divided by 3, or by formula in the Excel, taking the average of those 3, gives you 12.8%. That's what we came up with before. So guys, we've just been going through what we already did before, only this is from a mini case perspective on Excel. All right, so the weights were given to us. We didn't have to figure those out with the 150 million, the 75 million, and the 25 million. They were given to us 60%, 10%, and 30%. So we're all ready to figure out what our weighted average cost of capital is, both for WAC 1 and also for WAC 2. Okay? So weighted average cost of capital for WAC 1, all right? Here's my variables. Given, 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 given. I calculated my cost of debt. I calculated my preferred stock, and I also calculated my retained earnings cost. 12.8, 10%, 9%. 16, 10, and 30 were all given. So this, as you can see by the scroll bar, there's my cost of debt, the 242. Let me just let me double click on that. Here it's showing, bless you,
Thank you.
my weight of 30% times, not my weight of 30%, my cost of 10% times 1 minus 40%. So you got that portion for the debt, I'm sorry, you got that portion for the preferred stock, and you have that portion for the common equity. Okay, and that's just the same as what we have here. Whoop. Okay, so that gave us a WAC 1 of 10.38% cost, and I think that's exactly what we came up with before. 10.38. Okay. Now we're going to figure out what new stock would be. We had to issue new stock using the discounted cash flow. We did this before. Cost of that common equity when issuing new stock was dividend year 1 divided by the stock price times 1 minus flotation fees plus the growth rate. It's a constant growth stock. Run our numbers from above. We're given the $50 initial stock price. We're given the initial dividend of $3.12, growth rate 5.8%. DO times 1 plus the growth rate equals D1, which is 330. And we were given the 15% on the flotation fees. So here, when running all my numbers, I come up with my 13.57. I had 13.6 before, so just a rounding error. Okay. Weight's the same, tax the same, only this time I'm using my cost of debt, my cost of preferred stock, and my cost of external, RE, although it shows RS here, doesn't it? Not good. It's the external stock, 13.6, giving me a weighted average cost of capital of 10.84. And that's the same we had before. Or 10.86, and that's probably the difference here of 13.57 versus 13.6. Close enough for government work. Okay? So, one more step that I didn't show you on the PowerPoint slide. Well, actually, two more steps. So next, we're going to figure out how much of the money I have in retained earnings will cost me WAC 1 amount, and then how much more above that would be WAC 2. So here we calculate what the retained earnings breakpoint would be. This is the point at which retained earnings dollars that we are costing at WAC 1, run out, and there is a need to use dollars at WAC 2 amount based on issuing new stock. Okay? Right now, these are given. So my retained earnings breakpoint is my retained earnings. We're going to be given it that it's $300,000 divided by the weight of my common equity, 60%. Okay? Plus any depreciation funds. For this particular calculation, we have a depreciation amount of $500,000. So the key point is my retained earnings breakpoint formula is whatever the retained earnings are divided by whatever my weight of common equity is plus any depreciation dollars I have. That's the amount of money that I have at WAC 1 cost. I'm going to show you that graphically in a second here. Okay? So, basically by that formula, as you can see, 300,000 divided by 60% plus 500,000. That adds up to, I think, $1 million. Okay? Retained earnings breakpoint. So, how does that look graphically?
Like a graph.
I haven't even showed it yet. Everybody's moaning inside. Oh, please. Okay, here we go. It's not that bad. Easter egg flash. Okay. So my WAC $1, right? WAC $1 that cost me 10.38%. I'm graphing percentage over dollars. Okay. I have $1 million that costs me 10.38 cents per dollar. Okay? Good. The break point, that $1 million that I just calculated before, that break point, any dollar over that $1 million now moves into costing me 10.84 cents per dollar. Okay? This side of the break point, this $1 million, 10.38%. This side, extending outward, 10.84%. Okay? This will be one of your parts to your capital budgeting project. And the Easter egg is it should look very similar to what this looks like. Okay? Good? That's cost of capital. Went through the PowerPoint slides, did all the costing, did the weights, went through the mini case, did the calculations, the weights, and then added on the retained earnings breakpoint and the graph. Okay? So let's just do a quick look at Chapter 9 problems before we jump into our last section.
Already.
What's that?
I have a question already.
Bring it.
Okay, market value capital structure.
Yes.
Is that another name for something? 'Cause I don't remember. I don't remember what that is.
Market value capital structure.
Yeah.
That was when we looked at the market value of their debts, which are loans, their preferred stock, which is, you know, common equity, and also their common stock. So remember here, okay, we figured out what the market value is of their structure.
Oh, that's when we added them all together. Right?
Yes, the capital structure was basically their weights. So their structure is 60% common equity, 10% preferred stock, 30% debt or loans.
I'll just go back to the slide.
Okay?
Because I didn't see it in the chapter, like I was going back through the chapters and I didn't see that. So
Yep.
thank you.
No problem. Other questions? Okay, so chapter 9, the homework problems, there's a couple in there. But let's just kind of go down through them. You know, the first one, cost of preferred stock with flotation costs. Basically, all you're doing is solving for the cost of preferred stock. Okay? $60 preferred stock, 6% dividend, similar stock selling at 70.
What
Flotation
does the
cost
70
5%.
have to do with it? I don't get that part.
Are you comparing?
Yep, that's your, that would be your, you got $60 preferred, right? You got a similar stock selling out on the market of 70, right? So your current stock price is selling at 70. So your variable in that case is the stock selling price right now is $70. Okay? You didn't like my answer. Okay, sorry. So all we're doing is solving there for cost of preferred stock. Here, we just walked through this bond yield and after-tax cost of debt. Semi-annual bond, we're figuring out what RD is, and then times it by 1 minus the tax rate.
9.9.
That's 9.9. 9.10, cost of equity. Shelby Incorporated, expected to grow at 7% in the future. Stock sells at 73. Last dividend, DO, $2.
Wait, what? 23.
That was the stock price. The last dividend was $2. It's going to pay a dividend of $2.14 at the end of the current year, so it's already giving you D1. Look at DCF. What is the cost of equity? And then we're going to look at CAPM. Look at, because it says first beta, risk-free rate. That kind of points you to the CAPM approach. Bonds earn a return of 12%. Bond yield premium. You're going to figure that one out. And then you can figure out what the cost of the equity is. Basically taking those three and getting the average. Okay. All right. Mesman manufacturer, we're on a 913, cost of equity and flotation costs. So here we're looking at the Gorton model, but we have the 1 minus flotation on the denominator. Okay. WACC estimation. Here we have total market value is 60 million. During the year, the company plans to raise and invest 30 million in new projects. Present market value structure. So here you have debt and common equity. It doesn't have preferred stock, so you don't have to worry about it. Okay? So each one of those out of 60 million, you got WD is 50%, and WCE is 50%. So then you just go through and figure out what the cost of the bonds and cost of common equity are. Just don't try to force preferred stock into that because it's not given to you. All these bonuses.
No, they're not gonna matter tomorrow. Tomorrow will be like, what?
It's on the tape. This is all being recorded.
Oh.
Mine wants to listen to this AR.
Wow. Who wants to listen to this again?
No.
Market value structure. Here's where you just basically determine what your structure is. So what your weights are. Okay? That's all that one is. So let's move on to chapter 10. Estimating cash flows. Are you ready? 1 hour. Sound good? 1 hour. All right, let me move that out. Let me make sure I get those to you. Okay. You know what I think I'm gonna do? All right. Okay, we went through that. We got our break. Three Stooges. Good stuff. All right. Let me give high level. I'm going to give the high level on the first couple slides, and I'm going to go with the mini case. Okay? I'm not going to go long on the PowerPoint is what I'm saying. So I think it's more effective with the mini case. All right, basics of capital budgeting, evaluating cash flows. So we looked at the bottom part of the equation, which is cost of capital. Now we're going to look at how do we evaluate cash flows. Now, we've touched on some of this, but here we're going to expand it out. Here's an overview and the vocabulary. There's different methods to evaluating a cash flow. What a future cash flow would be in net present value perspective, what it would mean in internal rate of return, a modified internal rate of return, a profitability index, a payback, a discounted payback. Those are generally the ones we focus on in here. Okay, so these are all methods of determining how valuable a cash flow is. So we'll kind of walk through those, okay, and see what learnings we can find. So, big picture, project cash flows. The key point here is that you look at a cash flow over a period of time minus whatever the initial cost may be, okay? So from a timeline perspective, you may be looking at investing a certain amount of money, and then you're expecting to get future cash flows, such as Wendy's, right? When Wendy's did the market analysis for putting the Wendy's up there on Chilai Avenue, yeah. Putting the on Chilai Avenue, there was an initial cost that they had to go through, right? Bricks and mortar to build it, right? The tax assessment, what the taxes are going to be on that particular location over there. Also, bringing people in to do balance transfer, get people up and running, cooks, and whatever they're doing in Wendy's, right? Fryers, burger flippers, salad makers, all that kind of good stuff, right? So there's initial cost to that, and also the analysis was going to suggest that the demographics are, we're close to a couple colleges, and we're pretty sure that there's going to be people running over here during break to get money, and we expect all that money to be these cash flows over a certain period of time, okay? So we're going to estimate what those future cash flows would be minus the initial cost to determine, hey, is this something we want to get into and put a Wendy's over there? All right. Now, I just noticed, just recently, when you look at Wendy's picture, her necklace says mom. Is that me or is that just?
Oh, it really does.
Doesn't it say mom on it?
I'm never gonna unsee that now.
Yeah. Once I started seeing it, I was like, it's mom. So I didn't know if that was new or I just didn't see it before.
Sure. It's a color, but now that you pointed that out.
It looks like it says mom on it, right?
Yeah.
Probably does say wrong.
So there must be something behind it. You could probably Google it and figure that one out. All right. So cash flows have an initial cost plus forecasted cash flows in the future, right? This is how we analyze potential projects. I just walked through the Wendy's, right? Make long-term decisions on it. And it's very important to Wendy's to do this analysis and increase their footprint in providing hamburgers and all kinds of good things to people of the different regions that they're in. So we estimate these cash flows, inflows and outflows. We assess the risk on them. We determine what the cost of capital is for them, and then we evaluate them. Okay? So some of the things we might be doing, we might be replacing something to continue operations, these projects. We might be doing something to reduce costs, expansion into existing products or markets. Is your new car, is it a hybrid of any sort, or is it just a straight gas engine?
Yes.
Okay, straight gas engine. A lot of car companies are positioning themselves with hybrids, all electric, etc. So they would look at, capital budgeting expenditures to, put out products. There is a car company that actually made a decision to just do electric in a certain period of time. Is that Volvo? No, I know Tesla does electric right now. I think Volvo said in year X they're just going to be manufacturing electric cars. I think so. Could be wrong. Anyway, you get the picture. You know, in order to expand, sustain, companies are looking at capital expenditures to do so. There's safety, environmental concerns that they need to be aware of, and there could be other dynamics to that. So, projects can be looked at in two ways. They're independent, so they're unaffected by two cash flows. Okay. They aren't cannibalizing each other. So, you know, Wendy's could potentially put a Wendy's over on Charlotte, and they choose to put one over here on Buffalo Road. And the expectation is they are not cannibalizing from each other, but they are independent. Mutually exclusive is a situation where they potentially would put a Wendy's over on Buffalo Road, which would take away sales and opportunities from the Wendy's on Charlotte Avenue. So those would have to be considered mutually exclusive, since the cash flows of one could adversely be impacted by the acceptance of the other. So you have independent ones and you have ones that are mutually exclusive. Okay? Okay, here I'm going to jump to the mini case. Okay. So I'm going to be going through these cash flows just like I would do here. The mini case is going to add a little more verbiage to them that I think will help in the understanding. Everybody okay with that? Mm-hmm. So let's go to chapter 10 mini case. We're going to talk about a place that makes chicken and a place that does salad.
Yeah, I'm not.
Are you sure? There are many cases about
You're considering sponsorship of $1 million. Oh, here we are. Yeah, this is this is the same. We got the chicken and we have the salad place. Okay. You're on page 432 and 433. All right, so let's. What's that?
I like it.
What's that? That's a good start.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna get rid of that, and I'm gonna get.
Why can't we just invest it in that and make money off of it? Live off of the interest. Why do we have to
Figure out it.
franchise here?
Why do we have to go through any of this?
Right.
Well, because. All right. So here we are. I think this might be pretty close to the same. This was in the mini case. So you just graduated from the MSL program of Roberts Wesleyan College, and one of your favorite courses was Today's Entrepreneurs. In fact, you enjoyed it so much you decided you wanted to be your own boss while you were in the master's program. Your grandfather passed away and left you $1 million to do with what you please. Since you're not an inventor and you do not have a trade skill that you can market, however, you decide that you'd like to purchase at least one established franchise in the fast food area, maybe two if profitable. The problem is that you have never been one to stay with any project for too long, so you figure that your time frame is 3 years. After 3 years, you will go on and do something else. Does that sound like any of us? No? Okay. Maybe? Okay. All right. So you've narrowed down your selection to two choices. The first franchise is Lisa's Soups, Salads, and Stuff. The second one is Sam's Fabulous Fried Chicken. The net cash is shown below and include the price you would receive for selling the franchise in year 3 and the forecast of how each franchise will do over the 3-year period. Franchise L, or Lisa's Soup, Salads, and Stuff, cash flows will start off slightly, but will increase rather quickly as people become more health conscious. while franchise S, which is the Sam's Fried Chicken, will start off high, but will trail off as other chicken competitors enter the marketplace and as people become more health conscious and avoid fried foods. L serves breakfast and lunch, while S only serves dinner, so it's possible for you to invest in both franchises. They say that, so you notice that these are independent, okay? They're not mutually exclusive, where you can only choose one or the other. So they're saying one serves breakfast and lunch, while the other one serves dinner. Right, one is closed at the other time, the other one's open, right? So it is possible to invest in both. You see these franchises as perfect complements to one another. You could attract both lunch, dinner crowds and health conscious and not so health conscious crowds without franchise directly competing against one another. Okay, so let's put a little matrix on the board, or a little table on the board. So we've got Lisa, and we've got Sam. Bless you. Okay, bless you. So we're going to start evaluating their cash flows based on net present value, based on internal rate of return, based on modified internal rate of return, based on payback, and we're going to evaluate them based on, what is there, discounted payback, I think is another one, and profitability index. Okay? So each one of these, you can look at from the perspective of, kind of looking at the ratio analysis, right? Each one has a metric involved to it, a comparison. However, one key point is net present value trumps all of them. Okay, how many are familiar with the card game Euchre? Okay, we got a couple Euchre players in here. Trump is the highest card in the deck when it's called. Net present value is actual dollars coming back to the firm based on the cash flows. The others are percentages. So this is in dollars. This is a percentage. This is a percentage. Payback is a time. I'll put that as N. Discounted payback is N. And profitability index is a percentage. So the reason this carries more weight than the other measurements is because it's actual dollars coming back to an organization. Okay? All right. Everybody with me so far? So we're just going to kind of go through and we're going to figure out what each one of these is and determine if, we should go with Sam or we should go with Lisa. All right? And certainly because they are independent, we could actually purchase both of them. All right, so here are the two cash flows for both of our franchises. Okay? Each of them, it's going to take $100 to get in. That would be the initial cost of investment. Okay? For Sam, our first year dollars are 70, and then it starts to kind of drift off. Year 2, it's $50. And then year 3 is $20. And we're only in it for 3 years, okay? So in our evaluation, if I invested Sam's, my $100, I'm getting back 70 in year 1, 50 in year 2, and 20 in year 3, okay? For Lisa, salad, soups, and stuff, $100 invested, $10 in year 1, 60 in year 2, and then 80 in year 3. So remember it talked about how health conscious versus non-health conscious, there might be more of a response to the chicken place, right? Therefore, the forecast is kind of front-loaded, higher amounts on the front end, whereas the health conscious, we've been eating at, Sam's too much. Maybe we should, balance that with some good salad, right? Kind of like French fries and salad. They balance each other out, right? So here, you know, it's kind of a steady increase as people become more health conscious. Okay. And I think we can kind of see that in the marketplace with what are some more health conscious foods coming into play? Like Chipotle, would you consider that health conscious? No? Oh, I think so. It's got beans, it's got green salads. No?
I would say like four.
I'm not asking if you like it. I'm just asking if you think it's health conscious. No?
I mean, if you get a rice bowl without sour cream
Yeah, right.
and no rice,
Put a salad cake.
All right, maybe a bad example. Panera?
Yes. I think so.
Okay, Panera. Moe's, same as Chipotle.
Yes.
What's the other one? Core? Is there a core thing?
Core Life is not health conscious.
it's
They
not.
put way too much salad dressing on there.
it's just horrible in general.
Ask for a side of it.
It's
Okay.
like eating something that somebody
Yes,
already.
no, no.
Okay,
You should have just stuck with Panera.
I think it's just, yeah. I'll just stick with Sam's and so we got Sam's Chicken, we got Lisa's, right? So here we've got our cash flows. Now, keep in mind we're keeping this simple, so it says depreciation, salvage value, net working capital requirements, any taxes are all included in these cash flows. Okay? So very simple, everything's all up and in and included. All right? So what does that mean? That means it's simple tonight, right? But next week, all of a sudden these arrive. Okay, for our cash flow analysis next week in chapter 10. So very simple. What is the difference? Well, we've talked about capital budgeting till we're blue in the face. What is the difference between independent and mutually exclusive? Well, we've talked about that. When we can select both without impacting or negatively impacting cash flows, that's an independent project. Mutually exclusive would mean that if I picked one, it could negatively impact the other. Okay. So next, we're going to get into how do we determine the net present value for each of these franchises. Okay, so we're going to figure out our first metric here. Okay, and we're figuring that to calculate this net present value, we have the present value of each of these cash flows. Okay, and this value represents the value the project add to shareholder wealth. So NPV adds money back into the corporation, increasing shareholder wealth. So I'm going on the cost of capital being 10% given. Okay. Remember, we went through all this exercise of figuring out what cost of capital is. Here, they're just giving it to us. Okay, that 10% is taken from B296. Where's my B? Man, it's all the way down here. I don't know.
Is it given in the problem?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, you mean down here?
No, I mean, on the word problem, like in the work problem, yeah. Oh, it's right there.
Yeah. Plus, and the problem statement, it should be given in the 10%, I believe. I don't think it was given on the front end. Either way, it's 10%. Okay. So we can figure out by equation, right? NPV, what the sum of those discounted cash flows are, right? By going present value, present value, present value, or we can use the NPV function right out of Excel, not going through that manual exercise for each one, and doing NPV of our cash flows plus our initial investment, which was C50, $100. So I'm taking the net present value of these cash flows, and then I'm adding the initial cash flow. Okay. Very similar, or just the same as. Where is it? Where is it? Right here. NPV of the cash flows, taking away that initial cash flow. Okay. We're adding this, but notice it's an outflow. It's a negative. Okay. And these are all positive. So I could do it the long way, which is this one, or I can use my NPV equation.
And what was the long one?
The long way is when you're taking the present value of each one of these. So if here, I'm just taking the sum. See, here's my cash flow, right?
Mhm.
But I'm taking the present value at each period and I'm summing it that way. So if I look at my first, in longhand, that's taking the present value, n equals 1, 10% IY, okay? Future value is 70, then taking the present value. So that's what's happening each time.
Oh, okay.
Using the step for emphasis.
It worked.
It didn't work? I don't
Yeah.
know. So I could do it that way, or I can use my NPV formula to not go there. Make it a little easier, okay?
Okay.
And if I see that, then I know what you did. Okay? So, kind of got the equation, got what I got to, right? MPV, right? $19. What?
We wanted to.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. So here, this Sam's Fried Chicken, that cash flow that's kind of front-ended, 70, 50, and then 20, that's making me, or making me the person that inherited $1 million. I'm looking at that and saying, that's bringing back, $19.98. That's dollars back to the corporation, right? Now, if I look at L, which is Lisa's, again, same process, only I'm looking at that cash flow, $100 investment here, a little bit more of an incline of cash flows projected, people becoming more health conscious, conscious and trying more healthier based lunch places, etc. And breakfast places. $10, $60, and $80, right? NPV of that cash flow plus my outflow of $100, that gives me a net present value. Did the lights just dim, or is that me? Did it not dim? Okay. Every now I hear a bell, an angel gets his wings, all that stuff. All right, so here, 1878 is my NPV if I looked at Lisa's salad, soups, and stuff. Okay? So if I had to make a choice between the two, I'm going to go with the chicken, Sam's, right? Since they're independent, I could do both, right? All right, so that's NPV. Okay? All right, next. Rationale, we kind of talked about all that. Let's look at internal rate of return. Okay? I'm going to go through each one of these. That'll be the rest of your night. October 28th. Anybody dressing up for Halloween? Very good. Even though you're not allowed to?
Go for work.
We had one lady back in my EDS days, Elvira, unbelievable. It was just like, she's like one of the only people. You know who Elvira is? Yeah, just dressed to a T like Elvira. It's like unbelievable. And we had a guy that had a Wookiee costume.
Oh, wow.
That was really neat. Yes. Actually, I still think he goes to the openings in Star Wars. So, all right, back to our scheduled program. Internal rate of return. The internal rate of return is defined as the discount rate that equates to the present value of project cash flows to its outflows. So if the discount rate forces the present value of inflows to equal the initial cost, in other words, this rate is the interest rate that forces NPV to zero, okay? So essentially what it's doing is it's forcing this to zero to determine how much the rate of return is on those cash flows, okay? Again, you can use an equation which is in Excel. You can also use your calculator for this too. If you look at your calculator next to the cash flow button, you also have your NPV button. Right next to that is your IRR button.
Wait.
Okay.
Oh, I got it.
So we want to do a quick one here. Okay. Let's look at leases. Okay. So let's make sure everything is cleared. So second clear work, second clear TVM, second quit. We'll push our cash flow button. CFO is 0. We're going to put 100 in there.
100.
100 minus
And that's, yeah.
CFO. Okay, that's the initial cash flow, CF0. Okay, everybody there?
Do we have to hit enter for these ones?
Yes.
I know you pop them in and just arrow down.
Don't hit the equal.
Well, you're right, you do have to hit enter, my bad.
Oh, yeah.
And then hit enter. When you hit enter, it pops the 000 at the next to the decimal points. Okay, so CF0 equals 100.00, negative. Arrow down. CO1, cash flow 1, we're looking at leases. So let's put $10, enter. Okay? FO, we arrow down. FO1, we want that to be 1, enter. So that's a frequency of 1.
No, why is that one?
It only happens one time. F is a frequency of cash flow 1 happening once. Okay, you kind of have to get into your programming for cash flows on this one. Okay, cash flow 2 is $60. So 60, enter, arrow down, and you want that to happen once only, right? So FO2 is only 1. Okay, so 1, enter there. Our third is 80. CO3 equals 80, enter. Okay. FO3, that only happens once, enter. So CO4, just make sure that says 0, okay? So let's go back to the top. So you have CFO equals negative 100. Cash flow 1, CO1 is 10. FO1 is 1.
No, none of mine's.
You okay?
Just keep going without me.
No one is left behind.
You gotta
Should I
get
see
entered, but they're all wrong.
We're not gonna get stepped on.
It's set up.
I thought you were gonna say where they're all in the heater and like holding hands because I cry every time.
Oh my God.
See,
They're in the
Yes!
incinerator. Oh,
This is what we
garbage
call.
rates.
yeah, let's not go there. Let's not go there.
Alright.
CO2 is 60. FO2 is 1. CO3 is 80. FO3 is 1. And then it's 0 after that. So our cash flow is set up. Okay? Now, for giggles and grins, okay, let's hit MPV. I should be 10. Because remember, it was a,
Zero.
well, add 10, put 10 in there.
Oh.
10, enter.
I thought you were saying that was the answer.
No. Enter 10 in there. Okay, then arrow down and compute NPV.
No.
1878.
Wait. No. Oh, yeah, okay.
10 was I.
Then was I, right? Then compute. And
And then you should see MPV equals and then you click on it.
1878. Did anybody get 1878?
Oh, I did.
I did not.
Okay,
Yes,
well,
Grace.
Yeah.
1878, let's go.
3.
There we go. Give me some. That's what I'm talking about, in class. Cool.
Anybody
Good
else?
talk, Everybody, that was great class. That's all.
Okay, we're good. We're good. All right. Anybody need help?
So what was that? Can we do it again? So what was that doing? I have a hard time like understanding all of this.
You're entering the cash flows.
Right.
We entered our cash flows.
Okay.
The initial cash flow of
Right.
$100 negative.
Because we want to find.
We want
the
to find,
NPV.
we're going to find the net present value of that cash flow.
Right.
And then we're going to find the internal rate of return on that cash flow.
See, I'm wondering, okay, so I'm doing
So we
CF.
did this to find the internal rate of return. This was
And we
like,
can also see the NPV.
Right.
Because the calculator, once we get the cash flows in, we can figure out all those.
okay.
Okay?
That
So,
was my question.
let's see what happened here. I don't see,
Well, I deleted everything, I cleared all my work,
okay,
I started over.
all right, let's start over. You're all clear.
Yeah.
Negative 100,
And then
enter,
enter.
arrow down
01.
is 10.
Enter.
Wait, where'd you go? Oh, we're doing that one.
Because see, when I go back up to my CFO, it says 0 now.
Did you put 100 negative enter?
Yes. I promise, I did.
I don't, I'm not looking at this.
Calculator or
I'm just saying, why do I didn't do that? 100 negative.
Joe had to do
Enter.
a reset on her.
Just kidding, can I have that back?
Oh.
To me, when someone says enter, actually,
That's what I did the first.
Now, enter means the enter button.
What's the again?
100 which one are you talking about?
The rate.
10%, okay?
so CFO is negative 100.
Yep.
CO1 is 10.
Yep, happens
Enter.
once. CO2 is 60, happens once.
Frequency is 1.
Yep, each frequency is 1 for each of
1,
these.
enter.
Yep.
CO2 is 60.
60,
Enter.
Yep.
I got 50.
Enter. CO3 is 80.
80,
Oh, I got it.
Enter.
Yep.
Once.
Yep,
Enter. CO4 is 0.
so you're good.
That's all.
Go to MPV, click on that, it says I,
Wait, where's MPV?
right next to CF.
Oh.
NPV, okay, yep.
Click on that, what do you have?
I equals 0.
Oh, I got you.
10, enter,
That's the same.
because that's the cost of capital, 10%.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
arrow down, what's it say?
NPV equals 0.
Calculate. CPT, compute.
18.78.
Yay! All right, now, others that need help.
Oh, you mean that wasn't it? No, I'm kidding.
No, we can still use our calculator since it's all loaded out, right? So let's go to IRR. All right, it says IRR equals 0, and there's a little compute thing at the top.
Yes.
So hit compute. What do you get?
18.13.
I got a number. It's right.
18.13,
Oh my
right? So the IRR for Lisa's is 18.13, right? So I'm taking my cash flows, I'm causing them to see NPV is 0, and it's driving out a rate of return on those cash flows. So my rate of return on Lisa's cash flows is 18%. My rate of return on Sam's would be 23.56% if I were to go back and load all my cash flows for Sam's, right? Or if I use Excel, I just click on the handy dandy IRR, right?
It's literally just telling you to take all those values and it's doing whatever it has to do.
Exactly. Kind of what you just did on your calculator.
So how do you get that? I mean, you can just like right click and insert and then click the function you want, right? So
Correct. it has a little, right here's the function itself.
Yeah.
Which is included on each of the mini cases. Okay? So, one is 18.313%, the other is 23.56. Okay? So, if I was going to make a choice between Sam's or Lisa's just on internal rate of return, I'm going to look at the higher rate of return. So, I'm going to go with Sam's chicken again. Okay? Everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay. Modified internal rate of return. This gets really clunky. Okay? And because we use it on the homework once, I kind of leave it that modified internal rate of return basically peels it down one more layer, looking at the internal rate of return, but it's taking in consideration terminal values here. I'll leave it at that, okay? Bottom line is, as we're looking at this, we want to look at, well, what's the higher percentage rate of return on a modified internal rate of return? So I think on your calculators, I had one. Oh, there it is. Okay, you're on the IRR right now that says 18.13.
Yeah.
If you arrow down, it says RI.
Yeah.
Put 10 in there again, because that's the enter. Okay. Okay. Now arrow down again, and it says mod, and it'll immediately pop up with what that answer is. Yep. So modified internal rate of return. The 10 in there was again putting the cost of capital in. Because for internal rate of return, we did not use cost of capital yet. We only used around MTV.
Excel,
If we hit the Excel, it's just MIRR again.
So why did you do 10 for RI? Because that was.
Because that includes the cost of capital on each of those cash flows. The modified one does, whereas the regular internal rate of return does not include this as the analysis. Okay, so here you have the Excel version. We just did it on the on the calculator version, and we came up with Lisa's again, and that was 16.5%. And then for Sam's, it's 16.89. So once again, making an unhealthy choice is very profitable. Okay? All right, let's get into payback now. What do they have? Profitability next? All right. I believe if you arrow down from modified. No. No, that doesn't. Okay, go back to NPV. We had NPV, NFV, then we have payback. PV, hit compute. Okay, go back to NPV, the NPV button. Remember we had 18.78? This is for Lisa. If you arrow down, there's, I can't remember what NFV is. We're not going to worry about it. But if you arrow down one more, it's PB. And if you hit compute, you come up with 2.38, right? And that is a period of time. So in 2.38 years, okay,
Oh, wait, now it's yours.
here you are. In 2.38 years, Lisa's franchise over a 3-year period of time will pay itself back in 2.38 years. And you can kind of see that, right? My initial investment is $100. If I make $10 in year 1, I got 90 left. If I make 60 in year 2, I got 30 left. And if I make 80 in year 3, I got 50 on the positive side. So I know I land between 2 and 3. for my payback. Real simple way of determining payoff of a project, right? So here, it's 2.38 years to pay off. However, if I look at Sam's, $100, first year 70, I only got $30 left. Then I got 50, now I'm $20 on the plus side. So I know my payback period lands between year one and year two. And if we did the calculations, it is 1.6 years. So once again, you want something paying off sooner rather than later, right? So your choice would be Sam's. And the Excel version of that is percent rank. That's going a long way. Here it is. Percent.
Where do you find it?
Percent rank. It's in the financial equations. You don't have it? Did you find it?
I have to insert the function.
Where is it? Percent rank.
I have to go over to all, under show all functions.
More functions? Okay, I'm not going to go long on that. But percent rank is your payback.
Can you
Yes.
just click on it so that I can see what the, because there's a bunch of stuff I don't understand what the array is or what X is.
Okay, you got your 3. You're raising it to the 3 years, right? And you are essentially taking not the initial cash flow, but you have to take the cumulative cash flow. Because what it's almost a 2-step process, right? You're basically figuring out what's left over after each one is applied, and then raising it to the 3rd. This is a lot easier in the calculator with this particular one. Okay. So payback 1.6 versus 2.38. Discounted payback, this is where we add in the cost of capital, and I think if you arrow down one more time on the calculator, you get DPB, discounted payback. You hit compute, and you should get 2.69. Final run, folks. Enjoy it. It goes by quick. Not funny, right? Not funny.
Tough crowd.
Tough crowd. Now here, okay, if I just kind of pay back for Lisa, I have 2.69. What does that have? 2.7, so it's a rounding error. Versus 1.9. And then again, that's a percent rank, but you have to, you're adding in the cost of capital here, so you're taking the discounted payback to the fourth year. I find this a little more data intensive than the calculator, but it's there. And then finally, profitability index. I think that was up at the top. I think that's just a straight up formula. Yes. It's present value of future cash flows divided by the initial investment. So remember our present value of the future cash flows. We had, let's see here, present value of future cash flows. Let me just go up to the top.
What question was this one in our mini case?
This one here.
Mm-hmm.
I got the internal rate of return. Okay. I got my I'm on H right now. What is the profitability index?
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, we did IRR, we did MPV and IRR, okay? Went through the different costs for each one, okay? And then finally, we land on profitability index. Present value of all future cash flows, we have it for SAMs, and we also have it for leases divided by initial cash flow. Here, my present value of those, I go to the top, 296, etc. Come on, where are you pulling it from? It doesn't include, right? It just includes the present value of the cash flows themselves, year 1 through 3. And then we're taking that, again, this is a one and done for the homework assignment. We're taking that divided by what my initial cash flow was to determine what the profitability is. So I was more, not by much. Leases is at 1.19, the other's at 1.2.
So how could you do that on like calculator? What did you do? You
Profitability index,
yeah.
all I did was arrow down.
I did that, but I got this I.
Trying to find what profitability index is. I'm not sure if it's on that. I don't think I have that on the calculator.
Okay.
No, that's not on the calculator. Unless I'm totally missing it.
I didn't see it.
Because yeah, I is just the interest rate
Yeah.
or cost of capital for this matter. No, it's not on the calculator. So you have to figure out what the present value of the cash flows are divided by the initial cost. So not much difference between the two. One's at like 1.2 and the other's at 1.9. But I do all up and in comparison, Sam's is more attractive, okay? And one of the main reasons it's more attractive, if we go back up to the cash flows, you're getting your money quicker. So that's the consistency of why it's giving you good marks on each area. Anywhere from MPV all the way to payback period, etc. Those are cash flows. Questions? Okay. In chapter 10, you got 1010, 1017, 1020, 1021. And 1022.
It's so funny, isn't it?
Well, her sign.
She was so mad.
These again, when you get more, that means they're easier. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not.
So you're given cash
There's a lot of
flows,
words in this
right?
over here.
So, line up your cash flows, right? So get those in order, right? And then you can do your analysis, whether it's through RRR or MIRR, whatever it may be. But get your cash flows lined up, and then you can use Excel, or like we just walked through, you can do the calculator on it.
So
Okay.
1010 is pretty much setting this exact.
Yep, you got a project S and you got a project L, right?
It says NPV or
There you go.
And in 1020, it's negative totals though, does that matter?
Yes.
Okay.
It does matter, right? And look at it from this, let me give you a hint on that one, right? So here, you're looking at an expense, right? So you're gonna have to buy something, either a conveyor or a forklift. So in your analysis, what is costing you the less of the two? Okay. Good catch, because they all are negative. because you're gonna have to invest in something at an expense. Okay?
So for cash flows, you do the number and then the negative, right?
Yes.
And then enter the opposite.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, in 1017, make sure you do 2 timelines.
Or just in 1017 or?
Well, I'm emphasizing timelines in 1017 because what you have is you're analyzing 2 situations. One where it goes out for, let's see here. Machine A costs 10 million, realizes after-tax inflows of 4 million per year for 4 years, and after 4 years, the machine must be replaced. So this has to be replaced every 4 years. Machine B costs 15 million, averages 3.5 for 8 years, right? So you have one that's 8 years, right? And you have one that's 4 years. So you have to double the 4-year one to compare it to the 8-year one. But remember, in year 4, you have a cash flow of investing in another machine. Follow me? No? Let's write it on the board. Everybody good with Sam and Lisa?
Yeah.
Okay. So, for unequal lives, right, you have 2 situations. You have, what was it, machine A? It goes out to year 4, and you have to replace it, right? And then it gets to year 8. The other one goes from year 0 to year 8. You have all your cash flows in between, right? Are these all 3.5? And these are like 4. Do I have that right? But in year 4, you have to buy another machine, which is what, 10 million or something? So you have to buy another machine, so you have to figure that plus your cash flow, and then figure. So in order to make them equal at 8 years, the first one you have to double, but make sure in year 4, you add on that purchase. That makes it interesting. So as you divide up the problems, whoever gets the short straw can get 1010 or 1017. Okay, threw a lot at you.
So, can I just ask you a question?
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, so for 1010, I'm not looking at that chart, we're under 1011. I'm looking at the numbers they give me in that problem, right?
In 10, which one are you in?
In 1010. I'm looking at the numbers in the word problem, not the chart in 1011, right?
No,
Yeah. 1010 is calling it out there for you. 1011 has the chart.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it doesn't.
1011's got other numbers. Those numbers
Yeah.
don't correspond to 1010.
Okay, I was just asking.
Yep, we're good.
No, because I'm looking at the cash flows. The cash flows well.
Other questions?
For 1021, we're not doing F, right?
You're not doing F, so you're skipping F. And then 1022. That's it.
Wait, 1022 is weird to me.
1022?
Yeah.
Okay, this is Scampini. Recently purchased a delivery truck. The truck cost $22,500, right? So that's the initial cost. Expected to generate after-tax cash flows, including depreciation of $62.50 a year. Okay? So the truck has a 5-year expected life. The expected salvage value after tax adjustments are given below. Okay? So you have $62.50 in cash flows. You have your $22.50 initial investment. Company cost of capital is 10%. So here you have your cash flows, right? Year 0, year 1. So each one is showing your operating cash flow and your salvage value for each all the way till the end. should the firm operate until the end of its 5-year physical life? If not, what is the optimal economic life? So when would you operate this till you sold it? So you're looking at each cash flow, operating wise and salvage value, and comparing those to determine when it reaches a high point.
Is there an equation for that, or am I just looking at this chart?
You're taking this chart, and I would suggest adding a separate column to it. Okay? And then start to evaluate each year, right? The present value of each year. And when you hit your high water mark is where your optimal life would be.
How do we know we hit that? Right.
You'll know it as you go down through each one. So I would put a separate column on it and look at each year, okay, year 0 through 5, and you'll find that around year 3 we'll hit the high water mark.
So I need to figure out the present value of each year.
I can give you some extra insight on that. if you like. I'll actually provide them all with a template. How's that? That should not be reflected on it. Let me make a note of that.
Any hints you wanna send?
Yeah.
And the other ones too, feel free.
Campini. Hints. Other questions? If not, 9:26. You're dismissed. Joanna,
Thank you.
have a good one.
You too.
Well,
Got
yes,
your
problems.
The last one. Yeah, I'll probably be working on it Thursday.
So just give us a- I was thinking, Amazon. That was gonna take.
I think we might just be moving that. We need
You're the one who's working on it.
You're still sending the mini case early, right?
What's that?
Mini case early?
Yeah. Absolutely. Sir.
Well, we're sort of business, the Dolphins have a 14-3 lead over the Steelers, which is hilarious.
I gotta get home and watch that.
I mean, diehards to their parents for lunch tomorrow, so that'd be interesting. Should that game not turn out right?
Do we
Um,
tomorrow?
secondly,
Just do our problems.
all right, let's skip the third league, I don't remember. But,
We'll just skip.
that's things we can talk about the housing project that's on the go over it. It's pretty lost.
Yeah.
Just like hash out housing and stuff. Yeah, we think are gonna go over last week, but you went through the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna get my stuff done on Tuesday, and I'm starting my stuff. I'll keep these back by Wednesday. I'll coordinate back.
And this interview with the CFO type of housing. Say I know somebody who works at a bank, but not just a teller, like they work up higher up in the bank. If I talk to them about that, or shoot them a line, be like, hey, you know, is this something we'd be able to answer questions on? And then see how they go.
We're leaving Thursday. New York City, but like, first one.
Yeah, I may have to get on the Roberts too, because like I said, I mean, forward for the military.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to go on there.
Yeah, try to dig a little bit into the bank situation, let me know quick.
Yeah.
We'll get over here, so,
Yeah, I'll get on that this week. Oh, just run a second. You still running at the gym? You still work out?
I got the 24/7 pass, so it's just upstairs.
You don't run around the second one? Yeah. Yeah, if I still work there.
There you go. But yeah, that's I'm still at it.
It's all good.
Andrew's there Thursday morning, so.
Yeah.
But, and there's some regulars.
Oh yeah, no, my name's not so much with faces. Yeah, I'm really good with faces. I do a lot of basketball players. Actually saw I put up right across the street from do you know Dan Mundy? I live right across the street from his sister.
Okay.
She's married, got a couple kids and stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
And I like moved in there like probably a year and a half ago or so. And he was like maybe 3 weeks after I moved in, he was across the street. And I was like, yeah. He was like, what are you doing here? I was like, I live here. He's like, oh, my sister lives here. That was the funniest thing. Yeah. And then I see him at South Gas Station too. But there's a few people I remember.
Yeah.
And then I always know George's
There, yeah, they're pretty regular in there. Okay, yeah, Tom Lynch, he's always going in there. Bill, big guy. Him and Nick play racquetball a lot.
Yep. Bill and Stryker, Richard Stryker.
Yeah, Richard Stryker, they're both going there on a regular basis. Those are generally 18 people.
Yeah. I can't wait to get back. I took a lot of time off mainly because I got back from training. I had a wrist injury, but I also had to take a PT test for the military. And like college test is not really gym oriented right now. It's all just push-up sets and run. So if I start lifting, I get sore on my run. So it's like I kind of had to avoid that. So I take one after I got out of my after I got out of training during summer. My full-time job required me to take 2 years.
Okay.
So then I had to take another one for the school I was just at. So I kind of killed 2 birds with one stone, just doing kind of the same thing. And while I was in school, I'd take one for the school while I was there, and then I got to take one this week when I got a drill. So the third one in like 2 months. So once that's done, I'm gonna start like in the gym again hard, and I'm gonna try to create a healthy balance.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
Sounds good. All right, good to have you back in action here.
appreciate it. It's a lot better being in the new class and seeing what's written on the board.
Oh yeah,
So
I'm with you. I'm